Imagine waking up to the sound of gentle harp strings echoing through limestone corridors. The sweet scent of blue lotus drifting on the morning breeze from the Nile. You're not in a marble villa of Rome, not inside a smoky wooden hut of medieval Europe. No, you're deep in the heart of ancient Egypt, in a palace designed to touch the sky and embrace the gods. Tonight, we step quietly, reverently, into a world few dare to truly imagine, the world of a pharaoh's wife. Forget the polished museum busts and glimmering gold masks you've seen behind glass. Forget the modern fantasies of Cleopatra with her eyeliner wings and elaborate seductions whispered across centuries. The reality was far more layered, more sacred, and often far lonelier than the stories suggest. Welcome, dear listener, to a journey through corridors lined with reed mats where stone walls hide both opulence and sorrow, and where every sunrise was both a gift from Ra and a reminder of the delicate game of power and survival. Take a deep breath. Let your mind wander to the banks of the Nile, where the water glimmers like molten gold under the early morning sun. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a grand palace courtyard, birds weaving through palm trees heavy with dates, and temple priests chanting morning hymns to awaken the gods. The air feels still but charged, as if every particle carries secrets. Now imagine being chosen or born to be the great royal wife, not merely a companion, but the living embodiment of divine femininity on earth. Your title isn't just symbolic. It's spiritual, political, and intensely personal. You're expected to be a queen, a goddess, a mother, a diplomat, a silent witness, and sometimes an invisible sacrifice. The palace you live in is not just a home. It's a theater of illusions. Colossal columns painted in ochre and turquoise rise above your head, telling stories of the sun god Ra's daily voyage or of Hathor's dance of fertility and love. Your private chambers are cool and dim, shaded by woven linen curtains and perfumed with precious myrrh. But these chambers also echo with the weight of expectation. Every corner reminds you that you are always watched, always weighed against ideals you may never fully embody. While the outer world praises your beauty and grace, your daily life is tightly choreographed. A group of female servants and priests assist you in bathing rituals, scrubbing your skin with natron salts, massaging fragrant oils into your hair. Each gesture is both luxury and duty. You must glow like the morning star, for you do not represent yourself alone. You represent the strength of Egypt itself. Your jewelry? Not just ornaments. Every scarab amulet, every gold collar inlaid with lapis lazuli carries prayers for protection, power, and renewal. Even the heavy kohl painted around your eyes sent merely for allure. It is believed to ward off evil spirits, to shield your sight from both harsh desert winds and envious glances. You might think it glamorous, but it's also armor, delicate ceremonial armor worn in a silent battle that few understand. Each morning begins before the sun fully rises. As the horizon glows, temple priests bring offerings to Amun or Isis, chanting while incense spirals skyward. You may join them in the inner sanctuary, kneeling on cold limestone floors, hands outstretched in supplication. Your prayers are not just personal whispers. They are national invocations, woven into the fate of an entire civilization. Later, your day shifts into an intricate dance of audiences and ceremonies. Diplomats and foreign emissaries bow low, offering tribute, a chest of cedarwood from Byblus, fine linen from the Levant, or rare lapis stones from distant lands. You must smile graciously, your voice measured and low, each phrase a carefully curated ripple in a pool that can never show its depths. You might imagine banquets, golden goblets overflowing with honey-sweet wine, musicians strumming lyres under moonlit courtyards, plates of figs, dates, and roasted duck garnished with lotus petals. But in truth, those feasts are fleeting illusions, orchestrated for visiting dignitaries or major festivals. The rest of the time, meals are surprisingly simple, small portions of flatbread, lentils, fish from the Nile, fruit if the season allows. At night, as the palace cools and the stars crowd the sky like watchful eyes, your role transforms once again. You are the consort, the intimate confidant, yet often more emblem than a partner. The Pharaoh may love you, respect you, or barely acknowledge you. His eyes are often drawn elsewhere, to junior wives, to concubines brought from Nubia or Syria, or to dreams of divine conquest beyond the desert horizon. Your value is measured in many ways, by your lineage, your political alliances, and above all, by your ability to produce heirs. Each pregnancy carries the weight of dynastic survival. You might hold your breath with each missed moon cycle, fingers tracing protective amulets over your womb, while older priestesses whisper invocations in the flickering firelight. Yet beneath all the grandeur, every lost child, every failed conception, becomes another silent scar, hidden beneath golden jewelry and public smiles. If you bear a son, the entire palace reverberates with celebration. Priests chant, musicians play, and slaves scatter flower petals along the colonnades. But should misfortune strike, a stillbirth, an illness, the sorrow is private, locked behind doors, your grief wrapped in linen, like the mummies you pray over. Despite the ceremonial roles and public displays, there are small, quiet joys. Watching the sacred cats curl at your feet, feeling the cool marble under your hands in the temple garden, hearing the rhythmic splash of water-bearers moving through the courtyard at dawn. These moments are fleeting oases in a desert of expectations. And beyond all these layers lies the constant presence of death. Tomb painters nearby work day and night on murals depicting your afterlife. You are already preparing for a second eternal existence, a realm where you hope to be reborn as a star, sailing forever across the midnight sky with Ra's celestial bark. Your canopic jars, your funerary jewelry, your personalized Book of the Dead, they all wait silently in storerooms, anticipating the day you cross the veil. The irony is sharp. While you are revered as a goddess on earth, your earthly life is as fragile as a reed drifting on the Nile's surface. Your titles promise immortality, yet every cough, every headache, carries whispers of curses or divine displeasure. Tonight, as you listen to this story, perhaps lying in your warm bed, surrounded by the soft hum of modern life, imagine the weight of those roles pressing on your shoulders. Imagine the gleam of gold not as decoration, but as a mirror reflecting your fears and hopes. Imagine knowing that your worth is always measured against a cosmic balance you can never quite see. This is what it was really like to live in ancient Egypt as a pharaoh's wife. A world wrapped in linen and ritual, perfumed with sacred oils, echoing with chants that rise like the morning sun. And so, dear traveler through time, take one more slow breath. Settle into the cool shadows of the past. Because from here, we will step deeper into the labyrinth of royal life, the politics hidden behind veils, the intimate rivalries in harem corridors, the quiet rebellions and secret dreams behind coal-lined eyes. As the first beams of the Egyptian dawn spill over the Theban hills, the palace slowly stirs. In those fragile hours before the sun fully claims the sky, the pharaoh's wife sits in the inner sanctuary of her chamber, her silhouette framed by the gentle flicker of an oil lamp, while the outer courtyards remain shrouded in cool blue twilight. Here within, the rhythm of existence begins in ritual silence. Attendants move like quiet shadows, each step rehearsed for years. They bring trays lined with alabaster bowls of perfumed water, jugs of honey-sweetened beer for the morning blessing, and small offerings of figs and dates that seem to glisten with the promise of a new day. In the soft hush, the queen's hair is combed with wooden picks carved from sycamore, each stroke a small prayer for fertility, prosperity, and protection. Her scalp is massaged with fragrant oils of blue lotus and myrrh, believed to connect her to Hathor, goddess of love and joy. Every touch is a ceremony, each movement a thread in an endless tapestry of devotion and image-making. Outside, the first sounds of the city rise. Merchants shouting about fresh fish from the Nile, potters calling from narrow alleys, the bleating of goats echoing down dusty streets. But none of that noise crosses the barrier of her world. For her, the day begins not in chaos, but in composed choreography, designed to prepare her body and spirit to be a living icon, the earthly consort of a man believed to be Horus incarnate. Imagine the layers of linen being wrapped carefully around her body, each sheet bleached and starched until it becomes nearly translucent. These are not just garments. They are veils of power, boundaries between her skin and the mortal realm. Underneath the linen she wears amulets, a small ankh over her heart for eternal life, a tiny Wajet eye pinned above her navel for divine sight, and a golden scarab close to her womb to protect her life force. The headdress, a marvel of delicate design, is fitted with strings of lapis lazuli beads, the deep blue reminiscent of midnight sky and sacred rivers. The final touch, a ceremonial collar, heavy with turquoise, carnelian, and gold, sitting upon her shoulders like a cosmic yoke, a reminder that she carries not just family lineage, but the destiny of an empire. Through each dressing ritual, the queen must remain still, her mind a serene lake. Any flicker of irritation or fatigue might be interpreted as a sign from the gods, a ripple suggesting imbalance in Ma'at, the sacred cosmic order that governs every aspect of Egyptian life. Once prepared, she steps into a small alcove where the sacred mirror stands. This polished copper disc, framed by lotus blossoms and falcon wings, reflects not merely her physical image, but her divine role. In that gleaming circle, she does not see a woman with private fears and desires. She sees a living deity, the chosen vessel for the union between earth and sky. Next comes the incense ritual. A priest enters silently, carrying a brazier filled with smoldering frankincense and kifi. The fragrant smoke swirls around her, enveloping her senses, as if drawing invisible lines between her soul and the unseen realm. It is said that each coil of smoke carries a prayer upwards to Ra, who sails across the heavens in his golden bark. As the incense thickens, her mind drifts to the roles she will play throughout the day. She must counsel scribes on temple donations, preside over weaving workshops for the royal linen stores, and perhaps greet a foreign envoy presenting tribute. Each task is a different mask, each mask an echo of the eternal goddess she embodies. But beyond these duties, there is another reality, one rarely spoken aloud, the undercurrent of rivalry within the palace walls. In the shadowed galleries and sunlit gardens, secondary wives and concubines whisper among themselves. Some are Nubian dancers with eyes like polished onyx. Others are Levantine women, prized for their exotic features and honeyed accents. Though the queen holds the title of great royal wife, she must constantly reaffirm her position, not through words or violence, but through grace, fertility, and an unwavering devotion to ritual. In every smile shared with the pharaoh, every slight tilt of the chin during ceremonies, she is sending silent messages. I am still here. I am still favored. I am still the heart of this divine household. To outsiders, her life appears as a seamless tapestry of luxury. But from within, she navigates an invisible maze of expectations, subtle alliances, and quiet threats. The burden of producing an heir looms over every interaction. Even a simple glance from the pharaoh can carry the weight of 1,000 prophecies. As the morning progresses, musicians appear in the outer courtyard. The soft trill of reed flutes and the steady beat of hand drums signal that the pharaoh is rising. Soon, the queen will join him for the first public blessing of the day, standing beside him as priests pour sacred water over his hands, chanting verses older than the stones of the pyramids themselves. She watches from her balcony as a line of servants sprinkles rose petals along the stone path. Each petal is like a heartbeat, delicate, fleeting, yet part of the eternal rhythm that sustains the world. Below, The courtiers gather, their gazes darting up occasionally, measuring her movements, searching for any sign of weakness or favor. At this moment, she is both shield and sword, cloaked in divine persona, yet profoundly human beneath the layers of gold and linen. Her private joys, a secret look exchanged with a childhood friend, now serving as a handmaiden, the smell of freshly ground lotus seeds in her breakfast, porridge. These are small rebellions against a life prescribed in hieroglyphs and limestone reliefs. As she steps down the marble stairway toward the ceremony, her breath steadies, her fingers flex gently under the weight of her rings, and her mind gathers itself like a falcon preparing to soar. She knows that every movement will be etched into memory by scribes, by priests, by the gods themselves. The palace gates open, and a hush falls over the crowd. The Pharaoh emerges first, radiant in gold, his Nenis headdress catching the morning light like a living flame. She follows, head held high, embodying a quiet power that belies the endless calculations running beneath her serene exterior. In this singular instant, she becomes the living horizon between earth and sky, the bridge between human longing and divine decree. The crowd bows deeply, heads touching the ground. Drums roll low, like distant thunder across the floodplains. And she breathes once deeply, as if drawing the entire kingdom into her lungs. As the morning ceremony concludes, the Pharaoh and his great royal wife retreat into the inner courtyard, away from the sea of worshippers and the relentless desert sun. Here, the air is perfumed with blooming papyrus and the delicate sweetness of blue water lily, floating in small ornamental pools. Imagine stepping into this secluded garden, a living oasis carved from the stone heart of the palace. Tall date palms sway gently above, casting shifting shadows across the whitewashed walls. The subtle rustling of reeds along the edges of the ponds echoes the faintest whisper of the Nile beyond the walls. It is in this tranquil space that the Pharaoh's wife can allow herself to exhale, if only for a moment. But even in this supposed sanctuary, the palace machine never fully sleeps. Servants move gracefully along the edges of the courtyard, carrying baskets of fresh figs, trays of roasted duck breast glistening with honey glaze, and cups of pomegranate wine so thick it resembles melted garnet. Each dish is prepared to not only nourish, but also to demonstrate abundance. A quiet reminder that prosperity is a divine sign. Nearby, scribes crouch under pergolas, carefully recording each item of food consumed, each sip of wine taken. Every meal becomes part of a larger ledger, evidence of cosmic balance and divine favor. To the modern mind, it may seem intrusive, even absurd, but in this world, the smallest detail is a thread in the vast tapestry of Maat, the order that holds the universe together. The Pharaoh often withdraws to discuss state affairs or consult with high priests about the alignment of the stars, leaving his queen to manage her own intricate web of responsibilities. On these afternoons, she becomes the quiet sovereign of the domestic empire. Picture her overseeing the royal weaving workshops. Here, dozens of women work tirelessly at vertical looms, their fingers moving so fast they appear to blur, producing linen so fine it shimmers like moonlight on water. The queen moves among them slowly, her presence a combination of soft encouragement and unspoken authority. Every bolt of linen she touches carries her scent of myrrh and lotus oil, an invisible seal of approval. She speaks gently to a young weaver who hesitates over a knot. Her voice is low, steady, as though she is reciting a private hymn. The young woman's shoulders relax, and the rhythm of the loom resumes. In these interactions, the queen nurtures loyalty not through fear, but through small gestures of compassion, subtle, precise, yet deeply influential. Further within the palace compound lies another space, the nursery. Though the Pharaoh's wife is not always physically present here, her spirit dominates every corner. Clay dolls painted with turquoise eyes, ivory rattles shaped like sacred cats, and tiny linen tunics hang in orderly rows, all woven under her supervision. When she does visit, She sits among the children, legitimate heirs and lesser offspring alike, weaving small charms into their hair, whispering protective incantations against the evil eye. Each child watches her with wide eyes, a mixture of reverence and cautious curiosity. They know her not merely as a mother, but as a living extension of the gods, a mysterious guardian straddling the human and divine. In these quiet maternal moments, the queen may feel a fleeting sense of personal connection, a warmth that flickers beneath the cold architecture of duty. But even this tenderness is not entirely private. It too is witnessed by attendants, scribes, and priests. Every touch, every word is silently catalogued and weighed against the expectations of the realm. After visiting the nursery, she often withdraws to her personal study, a small, sun-dappled room adorned with papyrus scrolls and low alabaster stools. Here, she reads letters from regional governors, examines tribute inventories, and occasionally practices writing her own hymns to the goddess Isis. Her hand glides across the papyrus with elegant, almost meditative precision, each hieratic symbol a breath, each line a soft pulse of her inner world. Sometimes she composes small prayers, not for public recitation, but for her own secret solace. May my heart remain steady as the lotus upon the water, untouched by storm or serpent's coil. In this sanctuary, she is momentarily freed from the kaleidoscope of politics and ceremonial expectations. Yet even her solitude is fragile. A soft knock on the carved cedar door heralds the arrival of a handmaiden, bearing word of a visiting diplomat or a priest requesting her audience. She sets aside her reed pen, smooths her linen, and reassembles her face into the serene mask expected of her. The afternoon sun slants across the study, tracing long golden fingers over piles of scrolls and stacks of painted fan blades. Outside, the sounds of the palace intensify. Distant hammering from a new obelisk being carved, the low hum of court officials debating trade with Byblis, and the muted giggles of young courtiers practicing formal dances in a side courtyard. As she rises, her bangles slide down her arms with a whisper like the Nile's breath at dawn. Each piece of jewelry is more than ornamentation. It is a talisman, a fragment of the cosmic story she carries. The weight of her golden cuffs, the bite of the lapis amulets against her collarbone, these are constant reminders of her role as both shield and symbol. Walking through the connecting hallways, she pauses at a large wall relief depicting her standing beside the Pharaoh in a triumphal procession. In this image, she appears impossibly serene, her hands outstretched in a blessing pose, lotus flowers blooming at her feet. She gazes at it briefly, perhaps searching for some echo of her true self within those idealized lines. But she knows better. The stone shows not the woman, but the goddess mask the kingdom demands. Soon, she will attend a council dinner, a formal gathering where foreign dignitaries present rare gifts. Lapis lazuli beads from Afghanistan, fine cedarwood chests from Lebanon, silver goblets from Anatolia. Each offering is a small chess piece in a larger game of diplomacy and power. At the dinner, her expression must remain composed, her conversation polished and subtle. She cannot show surprise or delight too openly. Every reaction is watched, every word analyzed for hidden meanings. If she lifts a goblet too quickly, some may interpret eagerness. If she sets it down too softly, it might be read as indifference. The feast itself is an elaborate performance. Trays of roasted quail with pomegranate reduction, honeyed lotus roots, flatbreads adorned with poppy seeds, and freshwater fish baked in reeds. Servants slip between guests like ghosts, refilling cups and clearing plates before a crumb dares to fall. As musicians begin to play, lutes strumming gentle arpeggios, reed flutes weaving airy spirals, she allows herself to drift, if only inwardly. Her gaze skims the scene, past the towering torches and glittering metalwork, to the edge of the courtyard where the moon begins its slow ascent. In that private glance, there lies a secret conversation between her and the stars. Perhaps she wonders about the women who came before her, the forgotten queens whose names survive only in faded glyphs, their stories reduced to a few broken lines on temple walls. Perhaps she imagines a world where she might have chosen a different fate, where her mornings began in anonymity rather than in layers of linen and expectation. Yet she always returns to the present. Her mind, disciplined as a trained falcon, folds those wanderings into a small, hidden pocket of the soul. When the final course is served, and the last diplomat bows his farewell, she rises once more, her silhouette tall and unwavering against the torchlight. Tonight, as she returns to her private quarters, the air is thick with myrrh and jasmine. The corridors glow softly from oil lamps, their flames trembling in the night breeze. In these last quiet steps, she feels both the weight of the universe and the fragile pulse of her own heart, a dance of paradox she has learned to perfect. She enters her bedchamber, dismisses her attendants with a gentle wave, and stands alone before the sacred mirror once more. This time, her reflection is softer, edges blurred by exhaustion and candle haze. She lifts her hands to her face, fingers tracing the lines that no sculptor will ever carve into marble. A small sigh escapes, not of defeat, but of release. For a moment, in the sanctuary of the night, she is simply a woman. Not a goddess, not a mother of future pharaohs, not a living emblem of Maat. Just a soul, ancient and tender, breathing quietly beneath the veil of eternal stone. The first rays of dawn seep into her bedchamber, painting the alabaster walls with gentle pink and amber hues. In this tender hour, before the palace awakes in full splendor, the pharaoh's wife lies still, her breath steady and almost imperceptible beneath the gossamer-thin linen sheet. The soundscape is delicate, the rhythmic cooing of doves nesting in the eaves, the faint whisper of reed mats being shaken in distant corridors, and the subtle shuffle of sandals as early attendants begin their quiet dance through the hallways. These moments, fragile, liminal, are when she is closest to something resembling freedom. She rises slowly, each movement deliberate, like the opening of a sacred lotus. The room around her is filled with symbols. Carved ebony stools adorned with inlaid ivory depicting scenes from the Nile. A small chest painted with images of Hathor, the cow goddess of motherhood and joy. And jars of scented unguents arranged like a tiny army beside her bronze mirror. Her morning ritual is both intimate and public, for even here, eyes are always present, if not in flesh, then in expectation. A trusted handmaiden approaches with a basin of cool water, infused with crushed lotus petals and a hint of frankincense. As the queen cups the water to her face, the floral essence curls upward, tangling momentarily with her breath. After cleansing, she selects her kohl, ground finely from galena stones, and carefully traces the lines that will become her shield against both sun and scrutiny. The dark lines extend beyond her eyelids, resembling the wings of the falcon god Horus, a symbol of protection, watchfulness, and divine vision. Next comes the adornment of her hair, a ritual as sacred as the anointing of a deity. Her tresses, black as the night river, are braided and layered with strands of gold thread and tiny turquoise beads shaped like scarabs. Each bead is not merely decorative, but an indication of life, rebirth, and transformation. Whispered prayers woven into the very strands of her being. By the time she is fully adorned, with broad golden collars resting upon her collarbone, carnelian rings slipping over slender fingers, and a diadem, shimmering like captured sunlight, she becomes the living embodiment of Hathor, herself the celestial cow goddess and the sovereign of love, beauty, and feminine power. Yet beneath the layers of ritual, there is a steady heartbeat of vulnerability. She pauses by the window, looking toward the horizon where the Nile gleams under the rising sun. The river is not just a body of water, but a cosmic artery, connecting her people to the gods, to the cycles of harvest and rebirth. Watching its endless flow, she feels a pulse echo within her, the same rhythm that once tethered her to childhood laughter, the scent of warm, bred in her mother's kitchen, and the simplicity of days before crowns and chronicles. Breakfast is taken in a small loggia overlooking an enclosed courtyard. This morning, her table is set with honey-dipped figs, rounds of fresh goat cheese dusted with herbs, and flatbreads warm from the palace ovens. Dates and pomegranate seeds glisten in shallow alabaster bowls, each like a miniature sunrise captured in flesh. She eats slowly, each bite a measured act, every gesture watched discreetly by attendants. A sip of pomegranate wine leaves a faint stain upon her lips, a reminder that even nourishment is an act woven into the great tapestry of ritual. After her meal, she begins her daily inspections, a queenly duty that spans the entire living architecture of the palace. First, she visits the royal apothecary. Rows of earthen jars line the shelves, each labeled with careful hieratic symbols. Myrrh for purification, mandrake for fertility, blue lotus for spiritual elevation. The scent in this chamber is thick, an invisible fog of mysteries and ancient remedies. She listens as the head perfumer describes the latest batch of sacred oils, his voice low and reverent. She samples a new blend sandalwood, layered with crushed rose petals and a hint of cinnamon. She closes her eyes, feeling the fragrance coil around her, a soft embrace that momentarily blurs the edges of her role. From the apothecary, she moves to the treasury. Here, sunlight catches on gold statues of falcons and crocodiles, on chests overflowing with lapis lazuli, electrum bracelets, and ivory combs shaped like palm fronds. Each object represents alliances, victories, and the countless tributary relationships that maintain Egypt's supremacy. She inspects each item with a critical eye, running her fingers lightly over the ridged surface of a ceremonial dagger, admiring the delicate inlay of turquoise and coral. The guards stand at rigid attention, their spears reflecting a cold sliver of light. In these hushed walls, the queen embodies both allure and authority, the soft curve of the moon and the sharpness of its hidden blade. Her presence here is not mere ceremony. By personally witnessing the kingdom's treasures, she weaves herself deeper into the economic and symbolic web that sustains the pharaoh's power. She is both witness and warden, a living oath that nothing escapes the divine gaze. After the treasury, she visits the royal scribes. Rows of young men and women sit cross-legged on woven mats, hunched over papyrus sheets. The air is filled with the faint scratching of reed pens and the scent of ink brewed from soot and gum arabic. The head scribe rises and bows deeply as she enters, presenting her with scrolls detailing agricultural yields, foreign tribute, and the upcoming lunar calendar. She reads carefully, her eyes scanning the neat columns, her mind turning each number and phrase into silent calculation. A slight arch of her brow, a soft nod. These are her instruments of judgment, subtle yet decisive. The scribes hang on her slightest movement, waiting for confirmation or correction. In these visits, she is more than a wife. She is a silent architect of the kingdom's stability. Her knowledge is not merely ornamental, but strategic, an unspoken current guiding trade, tax, and even the timing of harvest festivals. By midday, the sun hammers upon the palace roof tiles, turning the courtyards into shimmering mosaics of heat and light. She returns to her private chambers, slipping into a shaded alcove lined with cool linen curtains. Here, she takes a brief respite, lying upon a cedar daybed carved with lotus motifs. An attendant fans her gently with a large palm frond, while another kneads fragrant oils into her arms and shoulders. The touch is soothing, yet the mind never fully relaxes. Behind her closed eyelids, she rehearses conversations with priests, ponders the subtext of a foreign envoy's latest gift, and contemplates the upcoming ceremonies in Karnak. In this half-waking state, she drifts between worlds, between the concrete clatter of politics and the silent, watery realm of dreams, where her soul swims beside sacred ibis and lion-headed goddesses. Here, for a few fleeting breaths, she is both queen and child, both icon and whisper. When she finally rises, the afternoon is already softening. She dresses anew, choosing a linen gown dyed with rare saffron, a hue reserved for the most sacred moments. As she adjusts the thin golden girdle at her waist, she glimpses her reflection, the tilt of her chin, the distant sorrow folded into her gaze. She stands for a moment, her hands resting lightly upon the low table, scattered with perfume bottles and alabaster figurines. Perhaps she silently repeats the same private mantra she offered at dawn, stitching together courage for the evening's demands. Outside, a new chorus begins, the rhythmic chant of servants preparing the great hall, the distant neigh of horses being groomed for ceremonial processions, and the echoing laughter of young princesses practicing their courtly bows under the watchful eyes of tutors. She steps forward, each movement echoing the delicate yet unstoppable current of the Nile. Every breath is both a vow and a reckoning, every footfall a silent hymn to Maat, to balance, to order, to the fragile equilibrium she alone must protect behind her gentle smile and kohl-lined eyes. As the afternoon dissolves into twilight, the air over the palace thickens with the fragrance of burning myrrh and the sweet, almost melancholic note of lotus incense drifting from stone braziers. The pharaoh's wife moves through this haze like a spectral figure, silent, shimmering, and anchored to 1,000 unseen threads that tug her gently toward her next duties. A procession begins in the outer courtyard. Musicians with curved harps and delicate reed flutes strike the first chords of a slow, rising melody, echoing across limestone colonnades. Dancers, adorned in sheer linen and adorned with gold armlets, glide in fluid arcs, their movements mimicking the ripples of the Nile and the coiling of serpents. She watches from a shaded balcony at first, her gaze sweeping across the scene with both distant calculation and tender appreciation. Each step of the dancers, each trill from the flutes, is a coded message to the gods and to the mortal eyes that watch in hushed awe. Soon she is summoned to descend and join the ceremony, an annual ritual offering to Hathor, goddess of joy and feminine power. An ivory staff is placed delicately in her hand, not as a weapon, but as an emblem of sovereignty and spiritual guidance. With measured steps, she walks across the courtyard floor, painted with intricate lotus designs, her feet tracing paths only she fully understands. The high priest approaches, bowing so deeply his forehead nearly brushes the ground. He offers a small alabaster vessel filled with perfumed oil, infused with blue lotus and myrrh. As she anoints a small altar set before the towering statue of Hathor, the air seems to tighten around her, the collective breath of dozens of onlookers held in a fragile, invisible web. Here, in this ceremonial pivot point, she becomes something beyond human, a conduit between the celestial and the earthly. The glow of the braziers flickers against her cheekbones, accentuating the fine lines around her eyes, hinting at the countless midnights she has spent negotiating alliances, mourning private losses, and reconciling the ever-pulling currents of power and intimacy. When the last prayer is whispered into the night air, she withdraws to an inner sanctuary, a space few are permitted to enter. It is here, behind a veil of linen curtains embroidered with lotus and papyrus motifs, that her truest self might emerge, however briefly. The chamber is circular, its walls lined with shelves of scrolls, treatises on astrology, medicinal recipes, poetic hymns, and private correspondences with faraway queens. Candles flicker in shallow bronze dishes, casting sinuous shadows that dance across the walls like silent companions. She sits upon a low ivory stool, her hands resting on her knees. Before her stands a small statue of Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of fierce protection and healing. In the lioness's obsidian eyes, she sees a reflection of her own duality, the gentle nurturer and the ruthless guardian, forever entwined. In this hush, she removes her diadem, the final symbol of her public face. The weight lifted from her brow is both literal and spiritual. Her shoulders drop slightly, Her breath deepens, and for a few heartbeats, she is not Pharaoh's wife, not queen, not mother of dynasties. She is simply a woman sitting alone with her thoughts tracing the echo of her own pulse. She unrolls a papyrus scroll, bearing a letter from a foreign queen across the sea. A sister in spirit, though never in blood. They exchange stories of palace intrigues, of the quiet language of flowers pressed between pages, of the private joys and small rebellions only queens understand. As her eyes scan the delicate hieroglyphs, she allows a small, real smile to curl across her lips, a fragile, fleeting softness rarely glimpsed beyond these veiled walls. Nearby, a small bronze brazier burns steadily. She adds a pinch of sacred resin and watches as the smoke unfurls upward, carrying her whispered invocations into the darkness above. It is said that these curls of smoke form bridges between the living and the divine, that they ferry human hopes and regrets into the ears of gods who rarely answer, but always watch. Outside, the palace transitions into its nighttime rhythm, the hush of guards exchanging shifts, the muffled laughter of kitchen servants preparing late-night bread offerings, and the rhythmic shuffle of sandals as temple acolytes ready themselves for dawn prayers. She listens to these sounds as one might listen to a distant lullaby, present but not pressing, a gentle thrum beneath the surface of her solitude. After a time, she rises and approaches a small pool of water set into the center of the chamber floor. The surface is still, like polished obsidian, reflecting the flickering flamelight, and the starlit sky glimpsed through a small ceiling aperture. She kneels, fingers grazing the water, sending faint ripples across the surface. In those ripples, she reads omens, sees the fleeting shadows of possible futures. A royal birth, an unexpected betrayal, the whisper of a plague carried upstream. Each vision is an unfinished poem, a thread in an ever-expanding tapestry she cannot fully control, but must guide with a steady hand and a guarded heart. Eventually, she prepares to leave this sanctuary. The diadem is placed once more upon her brow, the lines of her face smoothing into the serene mask expected of her. Her eyes, however, retain a subtle shimmer, a quiet testimony to the truths whispered in the dark. To the pieces of herself she gathers and scatters each day like handfuls of desert sand. As she emerges from the sanctuary, the moonlight catches her silhouette, rendering her ethereal, almost otherworldly. Attendants wait silently outside, heads bowed, ready to escort her back to her official quarters. Each step she takes through the moon-drenched corridors resonates like the soft beat of a ceremonial drum, steady, intimate, unwavering. Within the private garden adjoining her chamber, she pauses one last time before sleep. The air here is thick with night-blooming jasmine and the earthy sweetness of flowering lotus. A soft breeze carries the distant croak of frogs and the rhythmic hum of cicadas, weaving a nocturnal hymn around her. She lifts her gaze to the stars, endless pinpricks of light scattering across the black velvet sky. Each star, a tiny ember of possibility, a whispered promise of worlds beyond her own. She inhales deeply, allowing the cool night air to fill her lungs, grounding her in this liminal moment between worlds, between roles, between the sacred and the ordinary. Finally, she steps inside, shedding her golden sandals at the threshold. Her final ritual awaits, a quiet prayer to Mat for balance, a whispered blessing for the Pharaoh, for the children, for the kingdom, and perhaps, just perhaps, for herself. As she lowers herself onto her bed of woven reeds and linen, the palace breathes around her, a living organism of stone and spirit, of secrets and light. Her eyes drift closed, her final thought dissolving into the hush of the desert night. May tomorrow bring mercy. May tomorrow bring peace. And may the quiet parts of her spirit find space to bloom beneath the endless gaze of the gods. As dawn peeks gently over the desert horizon, the palace begins its slow, careful awakening. It starts with the hushed shuffle of servants in the outer courtyards, the faint clang of bronze basins being prepared for morning ablutions, and the muted calls of priests in distant temple halls reciting their first chants to Ra. In the queen's chamber, the light slides over intricate wall paintings, lotus flowers floating on serene pools, falcons in mid-flight, and delicate vignettes of Nile life, each image a silent hymn to eternity. The pharaoh's wife lies still, her breath soft and rhythmic, her mind drifting somewhere between the echoes of her private prayers and the tasks waiting beyond the veil of her linen canopy. Her morning does not begin with gentle luxury, but with layers of silent duty. Before the first meal, she submits herself to an elaborate cleansing ritual. Attendants move like quiet ghosts, bringing basins of water scented with blue lotus and crushed mint, pouring them over her hands and feet. The water, cool and fragrant, sluices away not only the dust of sleep, but symbolically purifies her for the day's demands. A mirror of polished copper is held before her, as one attendant deftly arranges her hair, thick, dark strands woven with fine gold beads and strings of tiny turquoise beads. Each plait is not simply decoration, but a message of lineage, of alliances, of carefully curated strength. Her eyes, rimmed with kohl, meet themselves in the mirror, patient, searching, unwavering. In that reflective surface, she witnesses not merely her beauty, but the accumulated weight of her role, a mosaic of choices and sacrifices cemented into her gaze. Once her hair is arranged, a sheer linen dress, so fine it seems woven from moonlight, is slipped over her skin. Gold pectorals shaped like protective scarabs and falcons rest on her collarbones, heavy but strangely reassuring, amulets against envy, illness, and unseen curses whispered in dark corners. A young servant brings her a small breakfast, figs split open to reveal their ruby seeds, bread sweetened with honey, and a small cup of diluted pomegranate juice. She eats sparingly, each bite accompanied by the distant sound of water carriers moving through the young courtyard and the gentle call of ibis birds fishing along the riverbank. Beyond her chamber, the palace hums with activity. Scribes hurry along mosaic-tiled hallways carrying scrolls. Linen merchants unload bolts of dyed fabric at the gates, and stewards bark quiet orders to kitchen workers preparing meals for visiting dignitaries. The pharaoh's wife steps onto a covered veranda overlooking an interior garden. Palm trees sway lightly in the morning breeze, and the scent of fresh date blossoms mingles with the earthy aroma of wet soil. Here, she receives the first petitions of the day, a practice both ceremonial and deeply strategic. Petitioners arrive, bowing deeply, some barely daring to lift their gaze above her golden sandals. A woman pleads for the safe return of her son, conscripted into a distant military campaign. A temple priest seeks favor for additional incense offerings to placate a restless local deity. A linen merchant offers rare Syrian fabric as tribute, hoping to secure a lucrative palace contract. Each story is a fragment of a vast, unseen tapestry woven across Egypt's shifting social landscape. She listens intently, her face composed, her mind threading possible outcomes and alliances, even as her eyes soften with feigned warmth or sharpen with calculated discernment. When she speaks, her voice is low and melodic, like reeds rustling beside a moonlit river. Her words, always carefully chosen, do not merely answer, but ripple outward, influencing markets, temple politics, and even the emotional pulse of the city beyond the palace walls. At times, her decisions are challenged, subtly, with the careful delicacy of those who know their lives depend on her favor. She deflects these challenges with gentle firmness, the way one might guide a stray breeze back into a flute's song. Her authority, though derived from the Pharaoh, is her own weaving, a tapestry of influence threaded through every corridor of power. After the petitions, she moves to the temple gardens. There, sacred cats prowl, lazily among flowering papyrus and lily ponds. Young acolytes scatter seeds for the birds, their pale linen tunics catching the sun like paper lanterns. She walks slowly among them, pausing to observe an apprentice scribe practicing hieroglyphs in the sand, correcting a stray line with a gentle tap of her ivory fan. In this space, she embodies the ideal of mate, cosmic balance, harmony, and truth. Yet beneath this serene exterior, her mind is never still. Each slow step is weighed against future implications. Each whispered greeting from a priest carries potential rumors or hidden loyalties. A young priestess approaches, bearing a small alabaster jar filled with unguent, a gift meant to symbolize devotion. The queen accepts it, her fingers brushing lightly against the girl's trembling hands. In that brief contact, she reads fear, hope, and the silent, universal language of women navigating worlds built to confine them. She moves onward, pausing by a small pond where lotus flowers bloom in patient defiance of the scorching sun. The water's surface mirrors her face back to her, fragmented by floating petals and the occasional ripple from a darting fish. In that fractured reflection, she glimpses the multiple selves she must contain: sovereign, mediator, consort, mother, and, buried deepest, the small, private self, who sometimes dreams of other fates, other skies. As the sun climbs higher, servants begin assembling a canopy of linen to shield her from the heat. She allows herself a final moment beside the pond, inhaling deeply the mingled scents of lotus and sun-warmed stone. Returning to the palace, her steps echo through the long halls, lined with statues of forgotten ancestors and painted reliefs depicting battles won and offerings given. Her hand trails along the carved walls, fingers brushing stories that stretch backward through centuries. An endless line of women like her, each carrying the same dual burden of adoration and isolation. At her chamber entrance, she pauses once more. The veil of her public persona settles again, a silken mantle woven from duty, myth, and the gentle, iron-strong resolve that pulses beneath her adorned skin. As she crosses the threshold, attendants gather swiftly around her, ready to prepare her for the midday rituals and the next cascade of decisions that await. But for a heartbeat, standing alone in that doorway, she lets the morning slip over her like a warm wave, a silent benediction before the next tide of demands. Midday in the palace brings with it a languid heat, the kind that seems to wrap itself around each stone column and painted corridor like an invisible serpent. Sunlight filters through alabaster screens, casting honeycomb patterns across the floors and leaving pockets of shimmering warmth that seem almost alive. In her private chamber, the Pharaoh's wife is readied for the temple rituals that mark the solar zenith, a moment when Ra, the sun god, is believed to be at the height of his power. Anointed with scented oils and adorned in a ceremonial gown of pleated linen, she becomes not simply a queen, but a living vessel of divine favor. Two priestesses approach, each carrying a delicate tray of ritual items. One holds lotus garlands woven with tiny lapis lazuli beads. The other presents a small, intricately carved alabaster bowl filled with sacred myrrh. The fragrance of the resin mingles with the soft rustling of linen, weaving an invisible veil around her as she prepares to cross the threshold from earthly responsibility to spiritual embodiment. A low chant begins somewhere beyond the chamber walls, a sonorous, steady murmur rising and falling like the slow breath of the Nile itself. She listens intently, her eyes closed, allowing the rhythmic syllables to seep into her bones. In these moments, she does not simply hear. She absorbs, becoming one with the pulse of the temple beyond. When she finally rises, attendants guide her through a series of passageways lined with reliefs of her ancestors presenting offerings to gods, each scene a whispered reminder of the lineage she upholds and the unending continuity she embodies. Her bare feet touch the cool, polished stone, a brief, fleeting contact that grounds her amid the swirl of incense and expectation. As she enters the temple courtyard, the air grows thicker with the perfume of burning kifi, an elaborate blend of honey, wine, raisins, frankincense, and myrrh. The scent clings to the fabric of her dress, to the strands of her hair, to the delicate skin of her wrists. Standing before the towering statue of Hathor, goddess of love and motherhood, she bows her head. The moment is intimate, yet hundreds of eyes watch from the shadows. Priests, scribes, guards, and visiting envoys, each interpreting her gestures as signals of favor, alliance, or warning. Her role here is more than symbolic. Each motion, each phrase recited from memory, is an invocation designed to secure not only divine blessings for the kingdom, but also her continued place within the labyrinthine web of palace politics. A young acolyte approaches to offer a tray of lotus petals and green reeds. She takes a handful, scattering them gently at the feet of the statue. The petals land like whispers on the warm stone, curling and shifting in the soft breeze, echoing the ephemeral nature of her power, simultaneously fragile and profound. When the offerings conclude, a procession forms. Musicians strike soft chords on lyres and sistrums, their melodies weaving through the pillars like drifting clouds. The queen leads the group along the processional path, her steps measured and deliberate. Behind her, priests chant invocations, and young girls carry baskets of fruit, bread, and flowers to be laid at smaller shrines along the route. The crowd watches with a reverence that is tinged with something sharper: fascination, fear, and the thin thread of envy that always coils around those who stand nearest the divine. Passing through the final archway, she pauses to touch a carving of Ma'at, the feathered goddess of truth and cosmic order. The coolness of the stone seeps into her fingertips, a tactile reminder of the fragile balance she must maintain between her public persona and private longings. After the ceremony, she retreats to a shaded pavilion overlooking an artificial lake within the palace gardens. The surface of the water glitters like hammered gold under the noon sun, broken only by the silent glide of sacred ducks and the occasional ripple from a curious carp. Servants bring a simple midday meal: cool cucumbers sliced thin, lentil cakes flavored with coriander, and a small dish of dates. She eats slowly, savoring each texture and scent, allowing her mind to drift briefly beyond the palace walls, to distant fields where farmers bend beneath the sun, to market stalls where women haggle over baskets of figs and turquoise beads, to temples in faraway provinces, where her name is spoken in hushed devotion or simmering resentment. A young scribe kneels beside her, unfurling a scroll detailing the latest trade shipments from Nubia and Byblos: fine incense resins, exotic wood for boat construction, and shimmering blue-glazed faience beads. She traces the hieroglyphs with a careful finger, absorbing the lines as though they were ripples in the sand. Each shipment is more than mere commerce. It is a lifeline to the outer edges of empire, a thread that ties her husband's reign to distant allies and unknown adversaries. She knows that each offering brought to her feet, each bolt of linen, each carved ivory figure, carries whispers of faraway politics, shifting alliances, and the subtle hand of fate. As the afternoon sun dips slightly, casting long shadows across the pavilion floor, a messenger arrives bearing a delicate basket. Inside, nestled among lotus blooms and fresh reeds, is a small papyrus scroll. Her fingers tremble almost imperceptibly as she breaks the wax seal, a simple, private gesture in a life saturated with spectacle. The words within are written in a careful, elegant hand. They speak not of state affairs or temple decrees, but of intimate anxieties: a sister's illness in a nearby province, a mother's dream of a falcon hovering above the granaries, a friend's whispered fears of political plots against the throne. Reading these lines, her expression remains unchanged to any observer, serene and statuesque. But within, tides shift. For all her adornments and titles, she is deeply bound to a network of private relationships, fragile as lotus stems, bending beneath the invisible currents of the Nile. When she finishes, she folds the scroll with delicate precision, returning it to the basket. For a moment, Her gaze lifts to the lake beyond, to the pale haze of distant reeds swaying like an undulating curtain. In that stillness, she allows herself a rare fragment of vulnerability, an acknowledgement of the quiet currents that pulse beneath her gilded surface. Yet soon enough, the mask returns. She rises, calling attendants to prepare her for the next engagement, an audience with the chief architect overseeing the expansion of the palace as outer gardens. Even this, a matter seemingly aesthetic, is a deeply strategic move, each new lotus pool and papyrus grove a subtle claim on legacy, each paved path a silent declaration of control over both nature and narrative. As she walks back toward the inner sanctum, the sun lingers on her shoulders like a watchful guardian, casting shifting patterns through her translucent linen robe. She moves forward with the same quiet authority that has guided her through countless mornings and countless unseen battles, each step both an affirmation of her role and a silent rebellion against its confines. Late afternoon approaches, a time when the palace shifts into a softer, almost dreamlike rhythm. The light changes, becoming thick and golden, slipping through the latticed stone screens and setting each carved column aglow like molten amber. In these hours, the Pharaoh's wife moves through a labyrinth of hallways, each step echoing softly against the walls, etched with stories of gods and ancestors. She is accompanied by a small retinue, silent women bearing baskets of rose petals and jasmine oil, an elderly eunuch carrying a fan of ostrich feathers, and a young servant girl who holds a small bronze mirror. Their presence is constant, yet nearly invisible, like shadows attending a flame. She pauses at a secluded alcove to admire a wall painting depicting Hathor nursing the young Horus, her divine hands tender and impossibly serene. In that image, she sees the echo of her own silent struggles, the expectation to birth heirs, to embody divine motherhood, and to balance softness with unyielding strength. Turning away from the painting, she makes her way toward the inner sanctuary of the palace gardens. The path is lined with carefully arranged date palms and lotus ponds, their still waters reflecting the fading sky in delicate ripples. Here, she can almost imagine a world beyond the gilded constraints of her rank, a space where the rhythm of breathing matches the gentle sway of reeds and the sigh of distant water wheels. Upon reaching a quiet pavilion hidden among papyrus groves, she finds waiting for her a collection of scrolls. These are not official state decrees, nor religious liturgies. They are records of omens, dream interpretations, and astrological charts prepared by the palace's high seers. She seats herself on a woven reed mat, its surface cool against her skin. An attendant unrolls the first scroll, revealing rows of delicate hieroglyphs and symbolic drawings of stars, falcons, and serpents. The seer's interpretations are poetic, layered with warnings and cryptic blessings. A star's shift in the east might foretell prosperous harvests, or signal hidden betrayals lurking among her closest allies. She reads slowly, her fingers brushing each line as though tracing the veins of a leaf. This private communion with the unseen forces of the cosmos is among her few moments of true agency, when she can prepare, adapt, and shape her internal landscape before stepping once more into the choreography of court life. As she reads, her mind wanders to the network of intrigues, constantly simmering beneath the palace's marble floors. Courtiers and nobles plot in whispers, carried like driftwood down the Nile, each scheme entangling alliances and rivalries. She knows that at any given moment, her favor can tip the scales. Her whispered endorsement can elevate a family to new heights or consign it to quiet ruin. Beyond the immediate political theater, there are deeper, more intimate currents. She thinks of the young concubines sent from foreign courts, each one carrying not only the scent of distant lands, but also subtle threats and promises wrapped in silk. In public, they kneel, offer fruit, and perform dances meant to charm both gods and husband. In private, they tremble, eyes wide with the knowledge that one night in the Pharaoh's chamber could seal or shatter their futures forever. She carries the weight of these women within her, their hopes, fears, and silent prayers. To outsiders, they are simply ornaments in the gilded palace mosaic. To her, they are living reflections of her own delicate position, powerful and powerless all at once, both revered and expendable. A servant arrives bearing a tray of pomegranates, figs, and a small cup of hibiscus tea sweetened with honey. She accepts it, lifting the cup to her lips. The tartness of the hibiscus blooms across her tongue, grounding her senses. While she drinks, a quiet figure approaches, an elderly priestess of Hathor, her skin lined like the cracked banks of a dried canal, eyes soft yet piercing. Without a word, the priestess kneels and presents a small figurine carved from blue faience, a protective amulet shaped like the eye of Horus. The pharaoh's wife takes the amulet with reverent care, feeling its cool surface pulse faintly in her palm. The eye watches her, an eternal symbol of vigilance and restoration, reminding her that even in a world where she must move like smoke through corridors of power, she is never truly unseen by the divine. The priestess whispers a brief invocation, a ripple of syllables barely audible against the afternoon breeze. Then, as silently as she arrived, she withdraws into the shade, leaving the queen alone with her thoughts. She closes her eyes, letting the sounds of the garden settle around her, the faint splashes of a distant fountain, the gentle rustle of palm fronds, the low hum of insects tracing lazy circles in the thick air. In that moment, she allows herself to become porous, a vessel through which memory and prophecy can flow freely. She recalls her mother's teachings in her youth, the lessons spoken beside cool pools beneath moonlit skies, that every gesture carries weight, every glance a hidden blade or a balm, that a woman of power must learn to wear her softness like armor, to yield without breaking, to see without speaking. When her reverie ends, the sun has begun its slow descent beyond the palace walls, the sky now awash with strokes of ochre and violet. She stands, cradling the eye of Horus close to her chest as though shielding a secret flame. Attendants appear to escort her back inside. She walks slowly, every movement measured, each breath an echo of countless generations who came before her. In the corridors, torches are being lit, their flames flickering against painted walls, depicting eternal fields of reeds, the afterlife envisioned as a place of endless harvest and gentle breezes. As she nears her private chamber, she passes a group of musicians rehearsing for the evening feast. One plucks a harp with delicate precision. Another taps a hand drum in a heartbeat rhythm that stirs something deep within her ribs. For a fleeting second, she imagines stepping away from her role, simply becoming another figure among the dancers, a silhouette lost in the cadence of music and shadow. But the vision fades as quickly as it arrived. Duty reasserts itself like a familiar cloak. She steps across the threshold into her chamber, where fresh linens await and a basin of cool water has been set beside fragrant lotus oils. This twilight moment is hers alone, a sliver of time when she can peel back the layers of performance and remember that behind the layers of linen, behind the kohl-lined eyes and polished diadems, there beats a heart that once belonged to a young girl chasing dragonflies along the riverbanks. She slips her fingers into the basin, the water whispering over her skin, washing away the residue of ceremony and sun. In that small ritual, she gathers the scattered fragments of herself, preparing for the coming night, a night that will demand once again her grace, her watchfulness, and the quiet unwavering strength that sustains the fragile architecture of her world. As the last hues of twilight dissolve into a deep velvet night, the pharaoh's wife emerges from her private chamber cloaked in a fine linen dress dyed with indigo and adorned with delicate beadwork, resembling a constellation scattered across her shoulders. Her hair is oiled and braided, scented with myrrh and sweet blue lotus, each strand an echo of the Nile's dark, shimmering depths. A hush settles over the palace corridors as she moves forward. Servants avert their gaze, their knees trembling slightly at her approach. To them, she is not merely a queen, but a living embodiment of Ma'at, the principle of cosmic order and harmony. Her presence is a reminder that the balance of the kingdom rests upon her composed shoulders, that her every step reverberates far beyond these painted walls. Tonight, there is a banquet in honor of a visiting envoy from a distant kingdom beyond the Red Sea, a place of frankincense groves, soaring cliffs, and whispers of golden sandstorms. Political alliances, trade routes, and military support all hang in the air like delicate perfume. She knows that beneath the wine cups and honeyed figs, beneath the music and laughter, there is a tense undercurrent, 1,000 hidden negotiations flickering like torches in the night. She enters the great hall, greeted by waves of music from flutes and sistra, the air thick with the scent of roasting duck, coriander, and cardamom. Rows of oil lamps cast shimmering pools of gold across low tables heaped with dates, almonds, and sweet breads. Courtiers recline on cushions, their eyes following her with equal parts reverence and calculation. She offers a faint smile, an artfully restrained expression that suggests warmth but reveals nothing more. Her movements are measured, each turn of the wrist and tilt of the chin, choreographed through years of relentless practice. Every motion carries centuries of inherited wisdom. How to maintain poise when flanked by rivals. How to offer softness without surrendering leverage. How to read intentions hidden behind jeweled collars and courteous toasts. The Pharaoh sits upon an elevated dais, his skin painted with red ochre, his eyes lined in kohl as dark as a moonless desert night. He watches her approach, his expression unreadable beneath layers of ritual and kingly detachment. She kneels gracefully before him, not as a sign of subservience, but as a public affirmation of their sacred bond, a performance as much for the gathered dignitaries as for the gods invoked silently in every breath. He extends a hand, heavy with gold rings and amulets, and she rises to take her place at his side. Once seated, she allows her senses to drift among the hall's cacophony. She listens to the subtle rhythms beneath the main conversation, the whispered rumors between generals, the clipped words of merchants, discussing caravan routes, the laughter of a young noble trying to impress an older patron with exaggerated tales of lion hunts. She senses the hidden fears that underlie the opulence, the fear of drought, of border incursions, of the gods' displeasure manifested in the flood's unpredictable rise and fall. She knows her role is to project calm certainty, to anchor the hall in the illusion of everlasting stability. A group of dancers begins to perform in the center of the hall. Their bodies shimmer with beads, moving like rippling reeds along a riverbank. They tell the story of Isis gathering the scattered pieces of Osiris, weaving loss and resurrection into a tapestry of movement that seems almost to breathe. The Pharaoh's wife watches, her fingers idly tracing the rim of a golden cup. She feels the pull of the dance deep within her bones, the ache of stories passed down through mothers and grandmothers. Stories of women piecing together the broken fragments of their worlds again and again. A sudden hush descends as the envoy rises, offering a ceremonial toast in a language harsh and melodic. Translators murmur quickly, each syllable a careful bridge across cultures and ambitions. The Pharaoh nods gravely, raising his own cup in return. In this moment, her gaze sweeps across the hall and lands on a young servant girl kneeling at the edge of the feast, eyes wide with quiet wonder. Their eyes meet, a fleeting recognition of shared humanity, a glimpse beyond the masks of station. In that small exchange, she remembers herself as a young girl, hair tangled by Nile breezes, skin smelling of papyrus and sun. A girl who once believed that love alone could secure a place in the world, that tenderness was enough to move mountains. She breathes deeply, her expression returning to its practiced serenity. She raises her cup to her lips, the sweet wine flowing over her tongue like liquid dusk. The taste is layered, pomegranate, honey, a hint of date syrup. But beneath the sweetness, she senses the bitter undercurrent, the reminder that every sip, every glance, every word is part of a larger script written long before she was born. As the banquet progresses, she exchanges polite words with noble women adorned in turquoise necklaces and lapis lazuli earrings. They speak of children's milestones, of new amulets blessed at the temple, of rumors drifting along the trade caravans like loose petals on the Nile. Each conversation is a dance within a dance, an intricate exchange of veiled inquiries and cautious affirmations. Every phrase is weighed, every pause deliberate. Through this web of words, alliances are nurtured, rivalries managed, and the delicate architecture of power maintained. The music swells again, the hall illuminated by 1,000 oil lamps that paint the night with flickering warmth. Servants circulate with platters of grilled fish, sesame cakes, and small clay dishes of fermented honey. The laughter rises and falls like a gentle tide, masking the tremors of ambition and fear beneath. Hours slip by like beads on a string. The Pharaoh eventually signals the end of the feast with a slow, heavy gesture. One by one, guests begin to withdraw, their faces reflecting the weary satisfaction of a successful performance. She rises alongside him, the weight of the evening settling into her shoulders like a familiar shawl. As they walk side by side toward the private quarters, she feels the subtle shift in the air, the transition from the collective theater of the banquet to the more intimate, though no less ritualized theater of their shared chamber. Behind them, the hall echoes with the final strains of music, the scent of myrrh lingering like a ghost. Ahead, the torch-lit corridor winds into darkness, each flame casting elongated shadows that sway and stretch like silent witnesses. Inside their private sanctuary, servants prepare a small basin of perfumed water, rose petals floating upon the surface. She sinks her hands into the warmth, feeling the tension of the evening melt away one ripple at a time. In these late hours, when the palace has grown quiet and the last echoes of the feast have faded into the night, she finds a strange kind of solace. The moon rises high above the river, its reflection shimmering like a silver veil upon the water. She thinks of the stories that will be whispered tomorrow, the alliances hinted at, the glances exchanged, the future set into motion over shared bread and wine. She knows she has played her part, weaving unseen threads that will shape the kingdom's destiny in ways no scribe will ever record. As she lies down upon her linen sheets, the scent of lotus still clinging to her hair, she closes her eyes not in peace, but in quiet vigilance. Even in sleep, she remains a sentinel, a guardian of balance, a mother of the realm's fragile heartbeat, an unseen architect of dreams and dreads alike. And in the deepest stillness of the night, just before her mind drifts beyond the veil of waking, she feels again the faint echo of that young girl at the riverbank. A ghost of laughter, a flicker of hope, a reminder that beneath all the gold and ceremony, there still pulses a tender, indomitable soul. At dawn, the palace wakes in a slow, rolling wave of sound. The first thin rays of the sun slip over the limestone walls, shimmering on the polished floors and waking up every corner of the royal residence. The Pharaoh's wife stirs before the first servant dares to approach, her body trained to sense the rhythm of the morning, even in her dreams. She rises carefully, the linen sheets falling away like the gentle receding of the Nile flood. Her hair is unbraided, cascading over her shoulders in a dark river streaked with the scent of jasmine and sacred oils. Before she even sets foot on the cool tiles, two attendants stand waiting, hands folded, eyes cast down. Her morning begins not with comfort, but with ritual. A basin of Nile water mixed with rose essence is presented to her. She washes slowly, fingers moving in delicate circles over her arms and face, as if cleansing not only the sweat of sleep, but the unspoken burdens gathered in the hours between dusk and dawn. While she bathes, a soft chorus rises from the temple nearby. Priests chant hymns to Hathor, goddess of love and joy, her words weaving through the morning air like golden threads. The Pharaoh's wife listens silently, letting the vibrations of the sacred music anchor her mind before the day's layers of performance and negotiation begin anew. Once cleansed, she is wrapped in freshly pressed linen robes, layered lightly to match the gathering warmth outside. The first layer clings softly to her skin. The second is draped with artistic precision, designed to flow like river reeds in a breeze. Finally, she is adorned with jewelry, broad collars of turquoise and carnelian, delicate anklets chiming with every step, slender gold bands circling her arms like gentle serpents. These ornaments are not mere decorations. They are living talismans, each bead and metal plate blessed to guard her against unseen forces, envy from the court, curses from rival wives, or the malevolent spirits rumored to wander through palace halls at night. Her hair is combed and braided by deft hands, woven with thin golden threads and tiny lotus buds. By the time she gazes into the polished copper mirror, she no longer sees just a woman. She sees a living emblem, a figure sculpted to embody both mortal grace and divine authority. Breakfast is served on a low ivory table near the open terrace. Dates, figs, pomegranate seeds arranged like tiny rubies, honey cakes shaped into delicate spirals. A small jug of sweet beer, brewed weak and intended to soothe the stomach rather than intoxicate. She eats slowly, mind adrift across the vastness of her life, the unseen lines of power, the silent alliances threaded beneath the surface of every conversation, the unending dance between affection and strategy. From the terrace, she can see the gardens below, rows of papyrus and palm trees, a small pool reflecting the sky, bright splashes of hibiscus and lotus blooms. Beyond the walls, she glimpses the city coming alive. Market stalls clattering into place, bakers coaxing fires to life, fishermen balancing nets along the river's edge. These sounds drift toward her in muted waves, like the echo of a distant memory. Somewhere deep within her, she recalls her mother's voice singing to her as a child, the song of river reeds bending in the wind, a lullaby meant to anchor her to something softer than palace stone. Today, she will receive visitors. Official envoys bringing news of distant provinces, noble women bearing offerings and whispered secrets, scribes delivering scrolls filled with prayers, petitions, and warnings. Every meeting demands her attention, her subtle reading of gestures and pauses, her ability to balance warmth with restraint. The first visitor arrives just after sunrise. A matron from a prominent family, carrying a small alabaster jar of scented oil as an offering. She kneels low, pressing her forehead to the ground before being permitted to rise. The Pharaoh's wife accepts the gift with a serene nod, her eyes scanning the matron's movements for hidden meanings. They exchange polite pleasantries, words that on the surface seem harmless. Talk of the harvest, of new textile dyes, of a cousin's upcoming marriage. Yet beneath each sentence lies a thin network of questions and suggestions, rumors of an ambitious general, hints of shifting loyalties in a distant gnome, subtle testings of the queen's mood and influence. As the matron departs, another visitor is announced. This time, a priestess from the temple of Isis. She enters draped in shimmering white linen, a headdress adorned with tiny golden discs that catch the light like sparks. In her hands, she carries a bundle of fresh lotus blossoms and a tightly rolled scroll of prayers. Their conversation is different, heavier, more intimate. They speak of omens seen in the morning sky, of dreams that flickered like fish beneath the moonlight. The Pharaoh's wife listens intently, her fingers resting lightly on her lap, as though steadying the weight of each word. The priestess mentions a recent festival in Thebes, where a procession of sacred barks carried statues of the gods along the river. Thousands of devotees lined the banks, tossing petals and chanting praises. She describes the hushed awe of the crowd, the deep hum of collective devotion that seemed to vibrate through the stones of the city itself. For a moment, the Pharaoh's wife closes her eyes. In her mind, she sees the boats drifting through the water, gold banners shimmering under the sun, the fragrance of lotus and incense blending into a single, heady breath. A moment of unity, fleeting yet profound, reminding her that beneath all the politics and rituals lies a raw human yearning to touch something beyond the limits of flesh. When the priestess finally departs, the queen leans back against her cushion, allowing herself a single private sigh. The room falls silent, save for the distant calls of servants and the rhythmic splash of fountains below. A servant brings her a small wooden box. Inside, an assortment of amulets and charms, a carved eye of Horus for protection, a tiny ankh for eternal life, a scarab for renewal. She picks each piece up slowly, feeling their smooth surfaces, letting the symbolic weight settle into her palms. Beyond the private chamber, the palace continues its steady churn. Courtiers maneuver, scribes shuffle along hallways, guards swap quiet jokes beneath their bronze helmets. Yet in this still sanctuary, time seems to pause, a single breath stretched thin across the morning. She stands finally, returning each amulet to its resting place, and walks to the terrace once more. The sun is higher now, spilling gold across the river and sending sharp glimmers dancing over the city rooftops. A gentle breeze teases the edges of her robe, carrying with it the scent of palm pollen and distant cooking fires. In this moment, she feels the full span of her paradox, a figure both adored and scrutinized, both tender and unyielding, both deeply human and seemingly divine. She knows that her life is not her own, that she moves within a labyrinth built of expectation, ceremony, and unseen alliances. Yet somewhere deep within her, beneath the layers of coal and linen and protocol, there pulses a quiet, resilient heartbeat, a whispered promise to herself, a memory of a girl standing barefoot on the riverbank, eyes wide open to the sky. As the sun climbs higher, the air shimmers above the courtyard stones like a veil of moving glass. Within the inner quarters, the Pharaoh's wife withdraws to a shaded alcove lined with reed mats and fragrant cushions. Here, the midday hours drift slowly, marked not by bells or gongs, but by the steady hush of cicadas and the gentle gurgle of water flowing through narrow channels carved into the floor. This is her private sanctuary, a space reserved for contemplation and careful crafting of her inner strength. On a small low table lies a collection of papyri, some filled with hymns to Hathor and Isis, others covered in meticulously drawn household inventories, lists of perfumes, beadwork, lengths of fine linen, offerings of honey jars. Each line speaks not just of luxury, but of the invisible scaffolding that supports her public image. She picks up a reed pen, dipping it lightly into black ink ground from soot and gum Arabic. The movement is slow, deliberate. The act of writing is a rare freedom, a moment where thoughts, fears, and secret wishes can slip quietly onto the papyrus, shielded from the gaze of courtiers and attendants. Her hand moves carefully, each glyph a soft echo of her inner voice, steady, composed, yet always aware of the thin line between confession and caution. In one scroll, she writes a poem to the river. O Nile, you rise in secret places. You pour life into our veins without question or demand. In your flow, I hear the whisper of forgotten names, the laughter of girls who once ran along your banks without veils or jewelry. These private verses are not meant for others. They are offerings to herself, tiny acts of rebellion against a life where every glance is weighed, every gesture scrutinized. A gentle knock interrupts the quiet. A favored servant, carrying a small alabaster jar of freshly ground malachite for her eyes and a tiny bronze bowl of honeyed figs. The Pharaoh's wife nods softly, signaling permission to enter. The servant kneels and begins preparing the green coal paste, mixing it with drops of rosewater. As she does, she hums a simple tune, an old folk melody from the Delta, its words lost over generations, but its warmth intact. The queen listens, the corners of her mouth turning upward in a fleeting, almost private smile. Once prepared, the kohl is applied slowly, drawing dark lines along her lower lids, thickening the curve above, transforming her gaze into a pool of moonlit water, deep, reflective, impossible to read fully. When finished, the servant offers the figs. She takes one, biting into the soft flesh, the syrupy sweetness blooming across her tongue. In that moment, the palace disappears. No hushed rumors, no rival glances, no expectations. Just the simple, sticky pleasure of fruit warmed by the sun. Beyond the room, a low rhythmic thud rises, the sound of linen being pounded in the courtyard, as washerwomen beat robes against flat stones. The sound is steady, hypnotic, a heartbeat that connects her to the laboring women she may never truly meet. She leans back, eyes half closed, listening to this pulse of domestic life. In her mind, she imagines their conversations. Laughter over shared jokes, quiet sighs about aching arms, quick glances toward the sky to guess the coming weather. Their lives are hard and unadorned, yet in their simplicity lies a freedom she has only touched in dreams. A hush falls as a young scribe enters, bearing a slender reed basket filled with lotus petals and scrolls. He bows deeply, waiting for her signal. She gestures lightly, and he approaches, placing the basket at her feet. The petals release a soft, almost imperceptible fragrance, a whisper of the sacred ponds from which they came. One scroll is unrolled carefully, a record of temple offerings. She reads it slowly, line after line of incense measurements, gold leaf donations, baskets of barley. Each item a tiny stone in the vast architecture of devotion and political control. She knows that behind every jar of oil, every palm-sized statuette, there is a story. A merchant hoping to secure favor, a farmer begging for rain, a mother bargaining for the health of her child. Setting the scroll aside, she picks up a single lotus petal, turning it between her fingers. The petal is smooth, almost translucent at the edges, its veins delicate like the lines of a palm. She places it lightly against her cheek, breathing in its fleeting perfume, a small gesture that no one else will witness, yet one that binds her momentarily to something tender and ephemeral. As afternoon slides toward evening, she moves to a small stone basin set into the floor. It is filled with cool water, scattered with more petals and a handful of small pebbles from the sacred riverbanks. She kneels, hands drifting over the surface, creating tiny ripples that catch the fading light. She whispers a short prayer under her breath, words carried down from mother to daughter. May the river cleanse what the mind cannot hold. May the petals carry the burdens I cannot name. A hush seems to settle over the room. Even the breeze holds its breath. In this hush, the queen feels her most fragile and her most powerful all at once. The paradox of her existence crystallizes. To be venerated yet watched, to command yet be commanded, to be both a vessel of divine favor and a woman who remembers the feeling of wet earth between her toes. When she rises, her movements are fluid, almost ceremonial. The sun has dipped lower now, painting the sky in bands of rose and gold. She moves toward an open archway, pausing to look out over the distant fields where the last workers begin their slow return home. Baskets balanced atop their heads, silhouettes softened by dust and twilight. In this liminal hour, neither fully day nor yet night, she feels a deep, subtle vibration threading through her ribs. The echo of countless ancestors, the murmur of goddesses, the heartbeat of the land itself. It reminds her that her story is one layer in a tapestry so vast it cannot be fully seen, only felt in moments like this. She knows that in a few hours, she will join the Pharaoh for an evening meal, surrounded by musicians and dancers, every movement rehearsed, every laugh measured. But here, standing alone at the edge of day, she allows herself one full, unguarded breath, a breath that belongs to no one but her. When the evening drums echo across the palace walls, The Pharaoh's wife steps softly into her chamber to prepare for the ritual of the night. The corridors are dimly lit by flickering oil lamps, their small flames dancing like restless spirits against the painted walls. The servants move like shadows, speaking in whispers, each footstep softened by layers of woven reeds. Inside her room, a small group of attendants awaits her arrival. One carries a delicate carved ivory box containing sweet-smelling unguents scented with frankincense, myrrh, and crushed lotus. Another holds a slender bronze mirror, polished so finely that the moonlight seems to ripple across its surface. She sits gracefully on a low stool, carved from sycamore wood, its edges worn smooth by generations of queens before her. As her attendants begin their careful work, her mind drifts beyond the chamber's walls, following the rhythmic thrum of drums out into the vast, star-splashed sky. They begin by anointing her shoulders with oil, small circular motions that almost lull her into a trance. Each stroke is both a blessing and a reminder. Her body is a temple, and tonight she must become both priestess and offering. A young girl, perhaps no more than 12, braids her hair into long, tight plaits, weaving in thin strands of gold thread and beads shaped like tiny falcon feathers. The process is slow and delicate, each tug an echo of her mother's fingers long ago. In a quieter village life, she now barely allows herself to remember. As the final braid is laid across her shoulder, she raises her eyes to the bronze mirror. There she is, a figure who belongs more to myth than to flesh. Her gaze is deep, unfathomable, framed by thick black kohl, her lips painted with a tint made from crushed carmine beetles. A living emblem of divine femininity, sculpted to please not just her husband, but the gods themselves. Yet beneath this ceremonial surface pulses a quieter, more human rhythm, a heartbeat that longs for softness, for the warmth of unguarded laughter, for a hand held in the dark without expectation. But those longings are carefully folded away, pressed between the thin pages of her private prayers. When fully adorned, she stands. A translucent linen gown drapes around her like mist on the Nile at dawn, moving with her in gentle waves. Over this, a broad collar of faience and gold rests heavily on her shoulders, each bead cool against her skin. A final perfume, a blend of blue lotus and cinnamon, is brushed along her neck and wrists. The chamber doors open, revealing a torch-lit corridor leading to the banquet hall. She steps forward, every movement rehearsed to near perfection. The servants fall into a quiet procession behind her, carrying baskets of flowers, small bronze fans, and jugs of sweet pomegranate wine. As she enters the hall, a hush falls. Musicians pause mid-note, dancers freeze in graceful poses. All eyes turn toward her, the living embodiment of the two lands' prosperity and divine favor. The Pharaoh, already seated on his high-backed cedar throne, inlaid with ebony and ivory, watches her with an inscrutable expression. She crosses the marble floor, each step landing with a quiet finality, like a pebble dropped into deep water. She offers a practiced smile, one that reveals nothing and promises everything. Her hands are extended gracefully, palms open in a silent gesture of greeting. The music resumes, a slow, winding melody played on lyres and flutes, wrapping around the room like incense smoke. Servants move swiftly to fill goblets, replenish platters of figs, dates, and honey cakes. Dancers in shimmering linen sway and twirl, their movements telling old stories of rebirth and renewal. She takes her place beside the Pharaoh, her presence both an adornment and a silent axis around which the entire room orbits. Their conversation is sparse, carried out in low tones, woven with ceremonial phrases and ritualistic questions about the gods, harvest omens, and royal ancestors. Beneath the table, her toes curl slightly, pressing into the cool stone floor as if anchoring her spirit to something solid and real. The feast unfolds with a practiced grandeur. Platters of roasted duck, baskets of bread flavored with coriander and caraway seeds, bowls of lentils spiced with cumin and garlic. But for her, each bite is measured, each sip deliberate. She tastes only enough to maintain the illusion of participation. Her real nourishment is in the silent exchanges of glances, the small, unnoticed movements that reveal more than any public words ever could. Occasionally, she observes the entertainers, jugglers balancing clay pots, poets reciting verses in trembling voices, acrobats bending in impossible arches. Their dedication mirrors her own. A life built on performance, on the art of concealing exhaustion behind painted smiles. As the banquet stretches into the night, she sometimes lets her gaze drift to the upper balconies, where young noblewomen and high-ranking concubines watch, their eyes filled with a complicated mixture of envy, fascination, and silent prayers for their own futures. In those eyes, she recognizes echoes of herself, the same flickering uncertainty, the same dreams wrapped in veils of obligation. She wonders briefly what paths those women will take, what private rebellions they will nurture, what whispered poems they might scribble into the margins of their minds. When the final song fades and the last goblets are drained, she rises once more, performing the closing gestures of the evening. A low bow to the assembled guests, a brief touch to her husband's hand, a final serene nod to the musicians. The procession back to her chamber feels both endless and fleeting, as if she moves within a waking dream. Inside her room, the attendants quietly help her remove the heavy jewelry, unravel the braids, wash away the layers of perfume and paint. Each gesture is both an unveiling and a gentle erasure of the night's persona. Finally alone, she sits before a small shrine to Hathor, the goddess of love and joy. A flickering lamp casts wavering shadows across the gilded statuette. She offers a simple prayer, not for power or favor, but for softness in tomorrow's hours, for small pockets of solitude where she can breathe without pretense. In the quiet that follows, she feels the weight of her many selves, the queen, the wife, the goddess incarnate, and beneath them all, the girl who once ran barefoot through reed fields, unafraid of dust and wind. She lies down, the linen sheets cool against her skin. In the dim glow, she lets her mind drift, stitching together fragments of memory and dream. And just before sleep takes her, she feels, for a fleeting heartbeat, utterly whole. At dawn, before the first rays of sunlight spill over the horizon and awaken the mosaic of life along the Nile, the Pharaoh's wife rises. The palace is still hushed, as if the walls themselves hold their breath in anticipation. In this fleeting hour, she finds a rare moment of clarity, a fragile thread of solitude that she cherishes more than all the gold of the treasury. She steps onto the balcony, the air still cool, tinged with the scent of lotus flowers drifting up from the palace gardens below. The vast expanse of the river glimmers like a shifting mirror, reflecting both the coming sun and the long shadow of her thoughts. In this gentle silence, she can almost hear the whisper of reeds swaying in distant marshes, the distant croon of ibis wading through shallows. Here, alone with the morning, she becomes something beyond titles and ceremony, simply a woman breathing, feeling the pulse of the ancient land beneath her bare feet. The guards stationed along the periphery bow their heads, eyes carefully lowered. Even they understand this is a sacred moment, too delicate to disturb with the clang of bronze or the rustle of armor. Behind her, a handmaid appears silently, offering a clay cup of sweetened barley drink. She accepts it with a nod, wrapping her fingers around the warmth. The first sip is earthy, grounding, a humble counterpoint to the rich wines of the royal banquets. As she drinks, she observes the first stirrings in the fields beyond the palace walls. Farmers leading oxen into the furrows, children gathering water in clay jars, fishermen preparing their nets. There is a rhythm to their world, a rough, honest cadence marked by sweat and sunrise, so different from the calculated rituals and coded glances of court life. Sometimes she envies them, not for their poverty, but for the clarity of their daily purpose. Each day is dictated by the flow of the river, the turning of the seasons, the weight of a single harvest. In their simplicity lies a freedom she cannot touch. But she reminds herself that her life, too, serves a larger purpose. Her beauty, her grace, her very presence are symbols woven into the divine tapestry of the kingdom. She is not merely a wife. She is the earthly echo of the goddess Hathor, a living conduit through which prosperity and protection flow to the land. Turning from the balcony, she begins her morning ablutions. The attendants pour cool water over her shoulders from alabaster jars, the droplets sliding along her skin like moonlight on a pond. She closes her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her, a small ritual of cleansing that is at once both mundane and profoundly spiritual. They massage her scalp with oils perfumed with neroli and blue lotus, combing through her hair with delicately carved ivory picks. As they work, she drifts into a contemplative silence, counting the slow breaths, tracing the pattern of her heartbeat. Once ready, she dresses in linen so fine it appears translucent, catching the faintest movement of air. The fabric is woven by master artisans, each thread a testament to skill passed down through countless generations. Over her chest and shoulders, they place broad collars of turquoise and lapis lazuli, stones believed to hold the blessings of the gods and the coolness of the eternal sky. A final touch, a thin circlet of gold resting upon her forehead, adorned with a single cobra motif, Urias, a symbol of divine authority and protection. When she catches her reflection, she sees not just a woman, but a myth made flesh. Today, she is to oversee offerings at the temple. A procession forms in the courtyard, priests in white kilts, musicians with harps and sistrums, young boys carrying woven baskets of flowers and fruits. She walks at the center, the focus of hundreds of eyes, her pace steady and regal. Along the avenue of Sphinx leading to the temple, petals are scattered in her path. Incense rises in curling columns, carrying prayers skyward. The crowd bows as she passes, heads lowered not only in respect, but in hope. Hope that her presence might intercede with the gods for a bountiful flood, for healthy children, for the banishment of sickness. Inside the temple's towering halls, the air is thick with sacred chants and the deep, resonant hum of bronze bells. She moves slowly, her fingertips grazing hieroglyphic-carved walls that recount centuries of victories, divine unions, and cosmic cycles. At the innermost sanctuary, she pauses before a golden statue of Hathor. Here, she offers trays of pomegranates, honeycombs, and folded lotus blossoms. A high priest intones prayers, his voice rising and falling like the current of the Nile. She closes her eyes, allowing the words to wash over her like river water in the heat of summer. In that moment, she is both queen and supplicant, both sovereign and daughter of the gods. After the rites, she lingers in the cool shadows of the temple. Here, away from watchful courtiers and ceremonial expectations, she permits herself to wander mentally, drifting back to memories of her childhood on the riverbanks, where she chased dragonflies and learned to read the quiet language of reeds. A sudden breeze stirs the hem of her gown. She looks up, catching sight of a single feather drifting down from the temple rafters, perhaps from a nesting heron, or perhaps, as the priests might say, a sign from Mat, the goddess of truth and balance. She catches it lightly in her hand, studying its delicate spine, its softness against her palm. In that fragile, floating feather, she finds a reflection of her own existence, poised between weight and lightness, burden and grace, divinity and womanhood. When she finally returns to the palace, the sun stands high, painting sharp shadows along the colonnades. In the hush of her private garden, she sits by a small pond filled with sacred blue lotuses. Koi-like fish drift beneath the lily pads, their slow movements a calming balm to her restless mind. A servant brings papyrus and a reed pen. She dips the pen into ink, her fingers steady, her posture upright. But what she writes are not decrees nor ritual phrases. They are private reflections, small poems that only she will ever read. I am the quiet pool beneath the moon. I am the voice in the reeds no one hears. I am the fragrance that fades at dawn. She sets the papyrus aside, letting the ink dry in the soft breeze. For a brief moment, she leans back, closes her eyes, and breathes deeply. In that quiet, she does not feel like a queen, nor a goddess, nor an ornament in the palace's golden cage. She feels simply alive. And as the day bends toward twilight, she rises, smoothing her gown, preparing once again to step into her many roles, each layered over the other like fine linen. Each necessary, each performed with a devotion that has become as natural as the Nile's flow. As dusk wraps its violet shawl around the palace, the Pharaoh's wife prepares for another evening ritual, this time a gathering in the moon court. This secluded courtyard is hidden behind high stone walls, planted with fragrant night-blooming jasmine and illuminated only by braziers filled with perfumed resin. The moon court is not for grand feasts or formal audiences. It is a place of intimate gatherings, where the queen meets with a circle of priestesses, scribes, and trusted confidants. Here they share knowledge, recite poetry, exchange whispers of old prophecies, and, perhaps most importantly, find fleeting moments of unguarded humanity. Tonight, the moon is nearly full, floating high above like an opal set into the midnight sky. As she steps barefoot across the cool stone floor, the scent of jasmine weaves around her like a silken veil. Each inhalation carries memories of long walks along moonlit dunes, of secret songs hummed under starlight, of the first soft touches of affection given without expectation. A low table is arranged in the center of the courtyard, scattered with alabaster cups of pomegranate juice, bowls of figs and dates, small plates of honeyed almonds. A musician plucks a slow, hypnotic tune on a harp in the corner, the notes falling into the night air like dew onto lotus petals. The priestesses arrive first, each draped in fine linen dyed in shades of blue and green, echoing the river and the night sky. They bow deeply to her, but their eyes meet hers with a warmth rare in the formal halls of the palace. Among them is a woman named Nefret, whose soft laughter can turn any tense moment into gentle rain. Another, a scribe named Izit, brings with her scrolls of newly transcribed hymns and cosmic charts mapping the journey of IA across the underworld. Tonight's gathering is both ceremonial and personal. They will chant hymns to Hathor and Isis, discuss omens seen in the behavior of ibis and kites, and share the latest whispers from the temple's inner sanctum. But between those sacred words, they will also trade small confidences, a shared glance at a hidden bruise, a fleeting smile at a remembered joke, a silent touch on the wrist that says, "I see you." As the chanting begins, the queen closes her eyes. The voices swirl around her in soft spirals, rising and falling like waves against a moonlit shore. She feels the rhythm echo in her ribcage, grounding her to the earth even as her mind soars beyond the stars. In the lull that follows, Nefret recites a new poem she has written. Beneath the moon, I lay my sorrows down, like papyrus reeds bent beneath the flood. In stillness, I find the echo of my soul, a fragile bloom on dark water's edge. The words drift into the night, as gentle and ephemeral as the drifting petals on the garden pond. The queen's lips part slightly, a quiet sigh escaping, part relief, part yearning. For a moment, she is simply a listener, not a figurehead or an emblem. Izit then unfurls a scroll and shares visions from recent dreams, images of two cobras entwined, of a falcon flying across a burning sun, of a single lotus petal drifting downstream. The others lean forward, interpreting each symbol with reverent intensity. The queen listens carefully, her mind weaving these images into her own tapestry of meaning, each vision a potential seed for tomorrow's decisions and prayers. As the night deepens, the conversation drifts into softer territories. childhood memories, secret fears, moments of unexpected joy. The queen finds herself recounting a story from her girlhood, a day spent wandering beyond the protective walls of her family estate, her feet covered in mud, her hair tangled with reeds. Her laughter fills the courtyard, surprising even her. For a heartbeat, the entire circle is silent, caught in the rare warmth of her unguarded voice. Then, slowly, they laugh with her, not in mockery or formality, but in shared release. The sound weaves through the jasmine-scented air like a gentle breeze through date palms. At that moment, she feels a rare unity, a dissolving of all the rigid lines that divide her many selves. She is the queen, yes, but she is also the barefoot girl, the friend, the listener, the seeker. When the final chants fade and the guests begin to depart, each woman offers her a quiet blessing, pressing their foreheads lightly against hers in farewell. Each touch is a small tether, a reminder that behind the masks of hierarchy lie countless private worlds of quiet courage and secret sadness. Left alone in the moon court, she lingers. The moonlight pools at her feet, silver and soft, reflecting in her dark eyes. She tilts her head back, studying the bright scatter of stars. Somewhere beyond those shimmering points of light, she imagines there might be other women like her, queens in distant lands, mothers, poets, dreamers, each tracing their own silent orbits around love and loss, power and surrender. She closes her eyes, lifting her arms slowly as if to embrace the entire night sky. The linen of her gown whispers against her skin, a gentle hush that soothes the echoes of duty and expectation. In that pose, she is both a supplicant and a sovereign, both alone and connected to every soul who has ever gazed up in longing at the stars. Finally, she lowers her arms and exhales deeply, releasing the tight coil of tension that guards her heart. The jasmine breathes with her. The river, though unseen, seems to answer in a distant hush. And in this moment, unmarked by official records, unseen by scribes, uncelebrated in reliefs on temple walls, she discovers her truest sanctuary. Not a grand hall or a jeweled throne, but the quiet space between one breath and the next. In the quiet hours before dawn, long after the last echoes of laughter have vanished from the moon court, the Pharaoh's wife returns to her private chambers. Here, within these thick, cool walls of limestone, she is both most secure and most alone. Oil lamps cast gentle halos of gold along the painted scenes on her walls, images of sacred processions, lotus blossoms opening to the sun, falcons gliding above fields of wheat. These images are both reminders and guardians, ancient prayers fixed in pigment and line. She sits before a low table set with bowls of kohl and malachite, delicate brushes carved from palm reeds, and polished bronze mirrors. Preparing her face each morning is not merely an act of vanity. It is a ritual, a silent invocation of her public self. Each stroke of kohl frames her gaze into something regal, almost otherworldly. Each dusting of crushed malachite across her lids transforms her eyes into symbols, eyes that see beyond, eyes that reflect divine wisdom. But tonight, in the hush between worlds, she removes the layers instead. Slowly, deliberately, she wipes away the black lines, the green dust, a soft flush of pomegranate stain from her lips. The mirror reflects back the woman beneath the goddess, bare skin, the faint shadows of fatigue, and a softness no one beyond these walls is permitted to see. She pauses, fingertips lightly grazing her own face as if rediscovering an old friend. There is a tender sadness in this quiet unmasking, an acknowledgement of all the small selves she carries inside, like nested dolls, waiting patiently to be remembered. Beside her bed lies a small chest, its surface inlaid with turquoise and ivory, the clasp shaped like a lotus bud. She opens it carefully, revealing small papyrus scrolls tied with thin linen cords, delicate reed pens, and a small vial of fragrant oil. These scrolls contain her private writings, reflections on temple rituals, whispered prayers to Hathor, dreams she can never share aloud. In them, she writes not as queen nor consort, but simply as a soul drifting along the river of her own thoughts. She unrolls one tonight, reading by the flickering lamplight. My heart is a desert garden at dusk, each memory a thorn, each hope a fragile bloom. The sun sets, but I remain, rooted, waiting, whispering to the moon. A soft shiver passes through her as she reads. Perhaps it is the chill of night air, or perhaps it is the weight of her own words. She rolls the papyrus again, tucks it back into the chest, and seals the clasp. Lifting the vial, she anoints her wrists, her temples, the hollow of her throat. The scent, sweet, smoky, with a hint of myrrh, anchors her, a gentle reminder of her mother's embrace long ago, before destiny claimed her. Lying back onto the low bed, she pulls a linen cover over her, the fabric woven thin enough to catch the softest breath of air. Her mind drifts beyond the palace walls, beyond even the river's curve. She imagines the young fishermen out on their reed boats, lanterns bobbing like fallen stars on the water. She imagines a village woman rocking her child beside a clay hearth, her lullaby dissolving into the night. She imagines the high priests preparing for dawn ceremonies, their chants already forming in their sleep. In these imagined lives, she finds solace. For in those anonymous moments, those simple gestures of love, work, and survival, lies a kind of eternity that no gold diadem can grant. Tonight, her dreams do not bring visions of gods or symbols of power. Instead, she dreams of a lone ibis wading through shallow waters, its curved beak tracing circles in the mud. She follows it silently, her feet sinking into the soft earth. There is no audience here, no throne, no heavy circlet pressing into her brow, only the hush of reeds and the distant murmur of unseen currents. In the dream, she bends down, cupping water in her hands, and drinks. The taste is wild and mineral-rich, as if drawn straight from the veins of the land itself. She feels it run through her, clearing away layers of ceremony, expectation, and duty, leaving only the raw, pulsing heartbeat of a woman awake to her own aliveness. When she stirs awake, dawn is just beginning to bloom, painting the sky in watercolor shades of rose and gold. She lies still, watching the slow dance of light across the room. The lamp beside her has burned low, leaving a thin wisp of fragrant smoke curling toward the ceiling. She rises, stretches slowly, her spine clicking gently like a harp string being tuned. A servant waits silently outside the door, holding a basin of water. A queen takes it herself today, dipping her hands and splashing her face, savoring the shock of coldness that wakes her fully. In this small defiance, this single act of tending to her own body without an attendant's aid, she claims a private sovereignty, a reminder that beneath the layers of ritual, she is still a creature of earth and breath. She dresses simply, draping herself in a soft linen robe undyed, untouched by lapis or carnelian. Her hair is left loose, falling around her shoulders like a dark river at night. Today, she will spend the early hours alone in the gardens, tending to small shrubs of blue lotus and gathering herbs for perfumed oils. Stepping into the garden, she feels the dew beneath her feet, each blade of grass, cool and sharp. She kneels, fingers sifting through fragrant leaves, eyes tracing the slow crawl of snails across pottery edges. A small bird lands nearby, tilting its head curiously, then flitting away as she smiles. In these moments, she feels closer to the gods than in any grand temple ceremony. Here, each leaf is a verse, each petal a prayer, each ripple in the pond a glimpse into the hidden language of the universe. As the sun climbs higher, she rises, carrying a small basket filled with jasmine, mint, and young lotus buds. She presses the basket to her chest, closing her eyes for a breath. In this gentle embrace, she feels her many selves gather within her. The queen, the wife, the priestess, the girl who once ran wild along riverbanks. and in their quiet convergence, she finds a deeper kind of power, not one declared from a throne or etched into stone walls, but one that hums softly beneath her skin, steady as the river's pulse. As the sun climbs, its light ripples across the Nile like a hand smoothing silk. Within the palace, the hum of the day begins to rise. Servants shuffle through corridors with pitchers of water. Scribes whisper over fresh papyri, and guards adjust their linen headwraps in the growing heat. But beyond these orchestrated rhythms, the Pharaoh's wife retreats once more to a small inner sanctuary, a room few ever enter. Here, the air is cooler, scented with crushed sandalwood and sweet myrrh. Along the walls, niches hold small figurines of gods and goddesses, Hathor with her gentle cow horns, Isis with her protective wings, Bastet with her knowing feline eyes. A single window high above filters a thin shaft of sun onto a low altar. She moves toward it quietly, as though approaching a sleeping child. On this altar rest offerings, a bowl of pomegranate seeds glistening like scattered rubies, a small dish of honey, and a delicate vessel of lotus oil. This is her private temple, not the grand, echoing halls where priests chant in unison, but a secret heart space where her soul can murmur its own prayers. She kneels, laying her palms flat on the cool stone. In this hush, each breath feels like a tide washing her spirit clean. She offers thanks for the morning's small mercies, the scent of jasmine in her basket, the glimmer of dew on lotus petals, the momentary brush of a bird's wings nearby. She prays not for power or victory in distant campaigns, nor for the adoration of courtiers. She prays for clarity, to see her own heart amidst the labyrinth of expectations, alliances, and ancient prophecies. Afterward, she rises and opens a small carved box containing lengths of linen thread and fragments of turquoise and carnelian beads. With careful fingers, she begins to thread the beads into a new necklace, a ritual she performs each month in solitude. Each bead carries meaning, the turquoise for protection, the carnelian for vitality, the tiny gold discs for the light of Ra, the sun god. As she threads, she thinks of the many wives and sisters of pharaohs before her, each stitching their silent hopes into amulets and adornments, each holding secret conversations with the gods beyond the reach of scribes or advisors. In these private crafts, a different kind of power is woven, not the power of decrees or armies, but the intimate power of creating meaning, bead by bead, breath by breath. Outside, the court prepares for the midday meal, an affair of elaborate dishes, music from reed flutes, and a performance by dancers adorned in shimmering bronze scales. Servants glide through the halls, balancing platters of roasted duck, platters of figs glistening with honey, an amphorae of pomegranate wine. But she remains in her sanctuary, the necklace now resting in her lap like a coiled river. She closes her eyes, letting her fingers run over each bead, memorizing their smoothness and weight. Later, when she does join the banquet, she wears this necklace beneath her outer robe, close to her skin, where only she can feel its presence, a hidden talisman that hums with her private prayers. At the banquet, she sits beside the pharaoh, who wears his ceremonial Neni's headdress and speaks in low tones with high priests and foreign envoys. His voice, firm and melodic, floats across the table, weaving a tapestry of alliances and edicts. She listens, her posture graceful, her hands resting lightly on her lap. Courtiers glance her way, searching for a flicker of emotion, a hint of favor or disfavor. She offers them only the calm gaze she has perfected over years, a gaze that is both mirror and mask. When a servant approaches to refill her cup, she tilts it subtly, signaling just enough to avoid excess. A servant bows deeper, recognizing the unspoken language of the queen's restraint. In a court where excess is often mistaken for power, her measured gestures become a different kind of authority. Between the courses, dancers sway under the bright sun, their ankles strung with small bells that jingle softly with each step. Lyres pluck out winding melodies, echoing the meandering path of the Nile itself. She watches, yet within her mind drifts back to the sanctuary, to the scent of lotus oil, the cool brush of beads against her skin. Even amid the banquet's laughter and the peacock feather fans, she carries a quiet river within her, flowing in directions no eye can see. As the afternoon drifts on, guests offer toasts to the Pharaoh, praising his divine lineage and the fertility of the black silt fields. The queen raises her cup in tandem, her lips forming the ancient words of blessing. But in the small pause that follows, she feels an inner echo, the weight of generations of queens before her. The echo of prayers whispered into hollow nights, the silent vigil of women who held kingdoms steady while empires rose and fell around them. She feels, too, the tender ache of the world beyond the palace. The farmers whose calloused hands coax barley from reluctant earth, the potters shaping clay under sun-cracked roofs, the shepherd girls counting stars beside restless flocks. This interconnected web, this invisible lattice of lives, pulses beneath the gold leaf and alabaster glow of the banquet hall. And she, bound to it all, feels both infinitesimal and infinite at once. When the final course is cleared, bowls of honeyed dates and small sweet cakes dusted with ground lotus seeds, she excuses herself. Her exit is fluid and unassuming as a ripple disappearing into water. Back in her chambers, the day's light wanes into a soft apricot haze. She stands by the window, watching the shadows lengthen across the garden paths. Palm fronds sway in the dusk breeze, their silhouettes weaving quiet dances on the ground. She presses her forehead lightly against the cool stone window frame, breathing deeply. In this final solitude before nightfall, she feels the confluence of her many selves: the wife, the queen, the priestess, the gardener, the silent dreamer at dawn. A servant enters softly, bearing a small bowl of hibiscus tea, its color deep as garnet. The queen takes it, nods, and the servant retreats like a receding tide. She drinks slowly, each sip warming her from within, each breath expanding gently through her ribs. In the quiet aftertaste, she finds a strange sweetness, not of hibiscus alone, but of something deeper, the knowledge that beyond the hieroglyphs, the royal decrees, and the eternal stone statues, there is this singular, breathing moment, a fleeting note in an endless hymn. And as twilight drapes its indigo cloak over Thebes, she finally exhales, a long, soft sigh that feels like the release of an entire lifetime held in the hollow of her chest. As the final veil of night descends over the palace, the world beyond her chambers falls into a soft, breathing hush. The last echoes of sandals on marble fade, leaving only the muted song of crickets and the distant lapping of the Nile against its banks. In the soft glow of a single oil lamp, the Pharaoh's wife prepares for the last ritual of the day, a private ceremony not recorded on temple walls, nor chronicled by scribes. She opens a slender wooden box, its sides etched with faint hieroglyphs, invocations for protection, for clarity of mind, for balance of spirit. Inside the box lies a small figurine of Hathor, carved from alabaster, a slender ivory comb, and a collection of tiny amulets, eyes of Horus, scarabs, and lotus charms. She picks up the comb first, drawing it slowly through her long, dark hair. Each movement is unhurried, each stroke a soft whisper against the silence. Through the mirror, she watches her reflection fragment and dance in the flickering light, as though her spirit were shedding old skins, revealing layer after hidden layer beneath the carefully woven facade. When her hair falls smooth and shining around her shoulders, she places the comb aside and lifts the alabaster figure of Hathor, cradling it between her palms as though holding a small bird. She bows her head and breathes in deeply, reciting words so ancient they feel more like vibrations than language. Mother of music, of laughter and stars, guide my dreams beyond the lotus pond, hold my heart steady as the river's song. After the prayer, she gently places the figurine on a small altar by her bed. She arranges the amulets around it in a half-moon pattern, a quiet constellation designed only for her eyes. She extinguishes the lamp, letting darkness settle like a cool shawl over her skin. In this darkness, she can almost hear the walls breathe, as though the stones themselves remember the many queens who once passed through these halls, each carrying her own unseen burdens, her private rivers of joy and sorrow. Sliding beneath the linen cover, she curls onto her side, her hand resting lightly over her heart. The day's layers begin to drift away. The careful diplomacy at court, the echoing temple rituals, the ceaseless watchfulness of servants and guards. All these dissolve, leaving her suspended in a softer, more intimate silence. She thinks of the Pharaoh, perhaps already asleep in his own chamber, his breath heavy with the weight of 1,000 decrees and conquests. She wonders if, in some hidden corner of his dreams, he too seeks the quiet of a lotus pond or the gentle curve of a reed boat on the Nile at dusk. She thinks of the women in the royal weaving rooms, their hands moving swiftly through skeins of bright linen, their laughter sometimes breaking through the monotony of endless pattern-making. She wonders if any of them imagine her life to be draped in constant luxury, if they know of the invisible threads that bind her tighter than any ceremonial sash. Beyond the palace walls, she imagines the riverbank lit only by the moon. Fishermen mend their nets, old women tend tiny cooking fires, and children chase after the drifting glow of fireflies. Each of these small, unrecorded moments feels to her like precious beads scattered across the desert floor, unnoticed by scribes, yet gleaming with quiet importance. As her breathing slows, she senses the boundary between waking and dreaming begin to blur. Images rise unbidden, the white lotus opening to the first rays of dawn, the startled leap of a gazelle at the edge of the reeds, the soft hush of wings as an ibis takes flight into an indigo sky. In this space, she feels her spirit wander freely, no longer confined to the architecture of titles and obligations. She is neither Pharaoh's wife, nor queen, nor priestess. She is simply a soul, moving lightly through the moonlit corridors of memory and possibility. She dreams of walking barefoot along the Nile, her toes sinking into the cool mud, the water lapping against her ankles in gentle greeting. The air is fragrant with night-blooming jasmine, and the stars hang low enough she feels she might pluck one and tuck it into her braid. In this dream, she meets the girl she once was, before the palace, before the titles, before the weight of 100 gold amulets. This girl runs to her, eyes wide and clear as dawn. They stand face to face, palm to palm, heartbeat to heartbeat. The girl smiles wordless, and together they turn toward the river, watching its endless flow under the moon. There is no crown here, no expectations, only the shared rhythm of breath and water and stars. When she wakes, the faintest hint of dawn slips through the carved shutters, painting the floor with pale rose light. Her first breath is deep, deliberate, as though drawing in all the sky above the desert. She sits up slowly, her body unfolding like a new lotus blossom greeting the morning. The amulets by the bed catch the early light, their tiny forms casting soft, protective shadows. She reaches for the bowl of water brought at dawn and splashes her face, feeling each droplet as a small baptism. Her fingers linger at her temples, pressing gently as if to remind herself, I am here. I am still breathing. I am more than the echoes of marble halls. Standing, she drapes a simple linen wrap around her shoulders. Today she will visit the temple gardens, oversee the tending of sacred papyrus groves, and share quiet counsel with young priestesses in training. These duties wait patiently, like reeds swaying in the river's edge. But for this fleeting moment, she allows herself to move slowly. A queen who steps like a woman who remembers the girl in her dreams. She opens the shutters wider, letting the full tide of morning flood her chamber. The hush of twilight has given way to the bright calls of awakening birds and the distant murmur of servants beginning their tasks. She inhales deeply again, a scent of blooming lotus and warm sand washing over her. In that breath lies the delicate balance she has learned to master, the merging of power and vulnerability, ritual and wildness, public grandeur and private tenderness. And as she steps forward into the new day, she carries it all. Each prayer whispered in darkness, each bead strung in solitude, each dream of mud-slick riverbanks and starlit braids. She moves through the doorway, not just as Pharaoh's wife, but as a quiet constellation of all herselves, woven together in a tapestry more intricate than any temple relief. In that gentle, measured stride toward the waiting sun, she is, finally, fleetingly, wholly her own. As the sun completes its slow arc across the Nile and begins its descent toward the horizon, the palace transforms once more. The courtyards that shimmered under midday glare now soften into shades of amber and violet. Marble columns glow like lanterns, and the gardens seem to sigh as shadows stretch across the lotus pools. The pharaoh's wife sits quietly on a low stool near a window carved with delicate lotus motifs. She watches the sky change, each subtle shift of color mirrored in the quiet chambers of her heart. The sounds of the day fade, the laughter of children playing in the servants' quarters, the rhythmic clatter of grinding stones, the echo of sandals on sandstone, all dissolve into a tapestry of dusk. In this final hush before night fully claims the land, she reflects on the many roles she has embodied. Queen, wife, mother, priestess, confidant, symbol, each title a different shade of gold leaf applied to the surface of her soul. And beneath all of them, the constant thrum of her own quiet humanity, as fragile and persistent as the pulse of the river beyond the palace walls. She recalls mornings in the temple gardens, when dew-laced lotus blooms trembled in the first breath of sunrise. The whispered prayers shared with novice priestesses, their eyes wide with the weight of dreams and fears they dared not name aloud. The delicate dance of diplomacy at grand feasts, every smile measured, every glance a careful calculation between danger and favor. She remembers moments alone in her sanctuary, threading beads that held the weight of centuries, or reading soft, worn scrolls that described distant lands she would never see. The taste of honey on her tongue after a long fast, the warmth of a silken robe drawn around her shoulders during cold desert nights. She thinks of the Pharaoh, both her companion and her mirror. A man sculpted by duty and ambition, by divine expectation and mortal frailty. She sees him not just as a ruler clad in lapis and gold, but as a man who sometimes gazed at her across the banquet table with an unspoken longing for something, simpler, something beyond the reach of empire and eternity. She remembers the hidden moments, a fleeting laugh shared in a corridor, a tender touch beneath starlit colonnades, the rare occasions when he allowed his gaze to soften, if only for a breath. Beyond the walls, the Nile glimmers under the first touch of moonlight. Boats drift slowly, their sails like pale moth wings against the darkening sky. Somewhere along the bank, a fisherman hums an old song, and his voice rides the breeze into the night, weaving through the reeds and up toward the palace windows. In this hour, the boundary between queen and woman blurs. She feels her soul loosen from the gilded bindings of rank and ritual, slipping softly into a quieter, more private realm. Here, in the tender embrace of dusk, she is simply a daughter of the river, a listener to the wind, a keeper of silent prayers. She recalls the ancestors whose lives echoed within hers. Queens who held empires together with glances and gestures, whose names were chiseled into stone, yet whose true hearts were known only to the stars. She thinks of them not as marble effigies, but as living, breathing women who yearned, feared, loved, and wept in rooms just like this. The lamp beside her flickers low, casting elongated shadows that sway like dancers along the walls. In the wavering light, her reflection in a polished bronze mirror appears almost translucent, a gentle phantom of herself. She reaches out a hand, tracing the air as if to touch that fleeting image, to remind herself that even the most revered figure is still flesh, still breath, still infinitely vulnerable. As the last call of the ibis echoes across the courtyard, she rises. Slowly, deliberately, she walks toward her sleeping chamber, pausing to gather the small alabaster figurine of Hathor and the string of beads she had been weaving in private. These small relics, infused with her whispered hopes and fears, accompany her into the night like silent guardians. Lying on the linen-draped bed, she gazes upward, following the lines of the ceiling carved with stars and lotus blooms. Her eyes flutter shut, and the breath that leaves her lips feels as gentle as a ripple on the Nile. In the drifting haze of near-sleep images, bloomed behind her eyelids, a young girl running along the riverbank, a woman lifting a lotus blossom toward the dawn, a queen standing alone on a moonlit terrace, her face turned skyward as though listening to the secrets of the universe. These fragments weave together into a single, unbroken thread, the story of a life lived at the intersection of divinity and dust, ceremony and solitude, power and tenderness. She drifts further into sleep, her final thoughts curling softly around her like a silken veil. That life, even one adorned in gold and perfume, is no less fragile than the delicate petals of a desert bloom. But in the end, it is not the monuments nor the chants of priests that endure, but the quiet, luminous moments when the soul remembers its own true shape. Outside, the moon continues its silent vigil, casting silver pathways over the river and through the city of Thebes. Somewhere, a night flower unfurls, offering its scent to the darkness. The breeze carries it past courtyards, over walls, through shuttered windows, until it finds her, breathing steadily in her chamber. And in that serene inhale, she becomes part of an endless flowing hymn, the song of queens and mothers of lovers and seekers of every woman who has ever looked at the night sky and felt her heart echo back. So when you imagine her, the Pharaoh's wife, do not see only the glittering crown or the ivory throne. See the woman who, in the quiet hours, touched the edges of infinity with her fingertips and stitched her soul into the tapestry of the eternal Nile. A whisper, a ripple, a breath, and then, at last, a gentle surrender to the night.